The Lifestylist, episode 137, featuring Matt Maruca.
I'm Luke Storey, a former celebrity fashion stylist and founder of School of Style. For the past 20 years, I've been relentlessly dedicated to my deepest passion, designing the ultimate lifestyle based on the most powerful principles of health and spirituality. The Lifestylist podcast is a show dedicated to sharing my discoveries and the experts behind them with you. Would you like to work with me in Los Angeles to produce the Lifestylist podcast and everything I do at lukestorey.com? Well, check it out. I am hiring a semi-full-time assistant/brand manager, someone to be my right hand, to hang with me and help me produce everything that I'm putting out in the world. So if you're interested in working for me and with me, here's what you do. Listen up. Ready? Go to lukestorey.com/jobs to get a full description of this position as well as the application. So if you're interested in working with me, go to lukestorey.com/jobs. Please do not email, DM, anything like that. I have a very specific and effective protocol to save us all time and energy at that link. I look forward to hearing from you. Today's show is brought to you by my friends over at Organifi. Now, if you've been listening to the show, you know I always talk about their green superfood powder because I literally eat it every single day, and I'm not even exaggerating. The stuff is amazing. However, they just sent me a tub of this new product called Organifi Gold. And dude, it is so good. It's a ginger-flavored tea, sort of like a golden milk latte type situation. It's got turmeric, reishi mushroom, lemon balm extract, turkey tail mushrooms. Of course, it's totally organic. What's cool about it is you can make sort of a bulletproof drink, like a hot elixir with coconut oil, grass-fed butter, or ghee, or you can just make a smoothie with ice and, some kind of nut milk or something like that. So you can do it hot or cold. It's got no caffeine, no sugar, and it really relaxes you. So I really like it at night. It's like a nice warm drink. You make a nice fatty little drink out of it. It's gently detoxifying and just really chills you out. So I'm super into it. So it's called Organifi Gold. You can get it at Organifi.com. That's spelled with an I. And as always, your old pal Luke's got a hookup for you. If you use the code Lifestylist, you will save 20% on your order. So I'm still in the green powder, but I'm adding this to the nightly regimen now because the green powder's got a little bit of matcha in it, so I don't like to do that at night. I do that in the morning, and I do the gold at night now, and I'm about half a tub in, and I'm already freaking out because I'm running out. So check it out at Organifi.com. Use the code Lifestylist and save yourself a cool 20%. Today's show is brought to you by Sigmatic. Now, you guys know I'm always talking about their medicinal mushroom elixirs because I take them all the time. I'm super addicted to them. But now they've got a couple other products that I'm really into. They've got a decaf coffee for when I don't feel like freaking out on caffeine. And then they have a regular coffee, but not just coffee. Both of them are infused with medicinal mushrooms. So it's a mushroom coffee. They're fantastic. They've also got some matcha drinks like the matcha with lion's mane. And the thing that's cool about the Sigmatic drinks is they're totally organic. They're super powerful. Herbs and superfoods and mushrooms, but they're really easy to use. That's the issue I've had, like trying to be healthy and making myself some cool drinks, is that it's kind of a pain in the ass and I have to open up all these different containers and it's a big project. Their products come in these little packets. You just pop them open. They're very portable. I take them on the plane. I take them on trips. I keep them in my bag, in my car. I kind of have them all over the house. And I can just use them whenever I want. So Sigmatic, one of my favorite companies. If you want to check them out, I highly recommend that you do. To do that, you go to sigmatic.com. And like all of my sponsors, they offer a sweet discount to the listeners. If you use the code LukeStorey, you will save 15% off your order, which is a pretty good deal. So go to sigmatic.com, enter the code LukeStorey, and save 15%. Check it out. Okay, if you've tuned into the show, I want to give you a little forewarning. I highly suggest that you put on a helmet because our guest, Matt Maruca, is about to hit you upside the head with some deep biohacking science. My name is Luke Storey, and this is, of course, the Lifestylist Podcast. Today's guest is Matt Maruca. He's an 18-year-old researcher, writer, and vlogger. He's a coach of quantum biology, mitochondrial medicine, and optimal human health. He's also the founder of Raw Optics, where I got my super dope custom blue blocking glasses that you may have seen me post on social media. Check it out. Right into this, I'm going to let you know. If you want to check out Matt's glasses, actually, you send him your own glasses, either prescription, sunglasses, whatever, and he turns them magically into these crazy blue blocking glasses. You're going to learn more about why you would want to do that in the episode. But like all guests I have on the show, if they want to plug their stuff, I bug them and make them give you guys a discount. So go to mattmaruca.com/blue blockers. And if you want to check out his glasses, enter the code Lifestylist and he'll give you 10% off. It's pretty rad. So anyway, that's one of the things he does. But this is an absolutely monster episode. Matt might be the first biohacker I've ever met that gets more excited about this stuff than I do. And this might actually be the longest episode I've ever recorded. We sat down at the Standard Hotel in New York City and spent over 3 hours talking about every biohack known to man. We went so late, in fact, that one said night, that he ended up crashing on the couch because it got too late to drive back to Philly. And then the next morning, I enlisted him to help me shoot a bunch of content into the hotel. So now we dig deep into all of the many factors causing the systemic health problems in our society today and how we can combine new science and ancient wisdom to solve the problem and fix the dysfunction in our bodies on a cellular level. Here's what we talk about in this episode: what mitochondria are, how they run our cells, and why you'll die if they aren't doing their job. Pretty important information. The problem with health trends and fad diets. Struggling with migraines. He once had migraines for 3 weeks straight. Shit is crazy. You're going to learn how he cured them. How Jack Cruz, Matt's mentor, saved his life. How our man-made environment is damaging our bodies. How to figure out what you should be eating. That's you, capital, because everyone should be eating different food, according to Matt. Repairing mitochondrial function. The dangers of our current level of evolution as Homo domesticus, and you're going to learn what that means in the interview. Using technology to mimic natural environments and fix our bodies. The cold factor and why cold thermogenesis is so important for our health. Why infrared light is so cool. The restorative power of darkness. The benefits of sex, and the problem with men ejaculating too much. Why the sun doesn't cause cancer, but mitochondrial dysfunction does. And how humans are the first animal to live ungrounded from the planet and the sun, and why it's so important to get reconnected. Now, you might hear mention of me in this one that it's a 2-part episode, but I did a poll in my Facebook group, the Lifestylist Podcast Facebook group, if you want to request to join. If you guys wanted 2-parters, or if you wanted a one long single episode, and it was like a 90% vote for one long episode. So you're about to enjoy this 3-hour chunk of biohacking goodness. If you want to join that tribe on Facebook, just search the Lifestylist Podcast and you're going to find it. Or you can, of course, go to lukestorey.com and find out everything that I do. Here's one request, though, before we jump into this episode. And, you have to picture me here sitting at my microphone alone in my office. Now, I am broadcasting this on Facebook Live for the Facebook group and Instagram Live because it just makes it more fun for me. But I'm sitting here with the prayer thing, when you put your hands together in front of your chest, like I'm humbly begging you to give something back to the show right now. Now, I enjoy doing it. Sure, I make a couple bucks, not as much as I'd like to. Trust me, from running the ads on the show, that's kind of how podcasting works. But I do this mostly out of the goodness of my heart and just my passion for health and spirituality. And I love helping to alleviate suffering in the world. And if you want to help alleviate some of my suffering, here's what you can do. You can leave me a rating and a review in the iTunes app. Now, if you just open the podcast app, it has to be the Apple app. Okay, and I'll explain that. Just open the app, go to the Lifestylist Podcast, scroll down to the bottom right, and you'll see a little tab that you can hit called Leave a Review. If you just go into there and leave hopefully a positive review, click 5 stars and click send. It takes it takes actually about a day for those reviews to pop up. So it'll look like it didn't work, but trust me, it did, as long as you did it right. So please leave me a rating and review. You always hear podcasters asking for this, and there's a reason why. It has a lot to do with how visible your show is in iTunes. And the more visible it is in iTunes, the more successful the show becomes on many levels. So if you've been listening for a while, or even if this is your first episode and you like what I'm dropping down here, please support the show by leaving a rating and a review. The next thing I want to plug is the store on my website. So the store can be found at lukestorey.com/store. This is a place where I actually don't sell anything personally. I just link out to all my favorite things in the world. So when I find someone like Matt who makes something interesting that I use and I believe in, I link to it on the site. It's a great way for you to discover new brands, new hacks for your lifestyle, and pretty much everything that's cool that's mentioned within the episodes that I record with people ends up on the store if I've used it, vetted it, and believe that it's quality. So go to lukestorey.com/store. It's a benefit for you because you get tons of discount codes on there that are exclusive to my site. You support new and innovative companies and brands, and you support me and the show if it happens to be a brand that I have an affiliate relationship with, which many of them, thankfully, I do. So go to lukestorey.com/store. And don't forget that request to leave me a rating and review. I would greatly appreciate it. Okay, lastly, I want to plug next week's show with Donnie Epstein, the founder of Epi Energetics and Network Spinal Analysis. That one is going to blow your soul wide open. It is absolutely insane. So make sure that you subscribe to the show so you don't miss next week's episode. Last plug, I swear, and then we're going to get into this damn thing, is my appearance June 14th at Bulletproof Labs in Los Angeles, California. If you want to come, the event is free, but you must RSVP. Go to lukestorey.com/events. Come hang out with me at Bulletproof Labs in Santa Monica, California, June 14th. All right, you guys, that's it. I'm 7 minutes into this damn thing. I'm trying to keep these intros short, but there's just so much information to share with you. So now let's give an imaginary drum roll to our esteemed guest, perhaps the youngest and most knowledgeable biohacker in the world, Mr. Matt Maruca. So here I am in New York City with my good friend Matt Maruca. We're both wearing our custom dipped blue blocking shades that Matt made for us. And we've been having quite a night, man. We started out in my other hotel room, and then I had an issue there. It wasn't cold enough. We both like to freeze. We're into cryo and ice baths. And so we moved into another room, which is actually a little more spacious. So we're stoked, but we're starting this interview 2 hours later than we planned on. Thank God you're a roll with the punches, meditative spirit. But it's good to have you and good to see you, dude. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Luke. It's good to see you too.
You have the distinction of being by far the youngest guest on the Lifestylist podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah. When you just turned 18, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons I wanted to interview you, because having met you at my last event here in New York City and talking to you, I'm like, this kid is fucking smart. You know a lot of stuff, dude. And I think that it's really exciting that you're young and you're like really getting into health and all of the stuff that you're doing in terms of lifestyle. And I think that more young people could be served to hear people like you. Not that I would have listened when I was 18, but if I had peers that were like cool and normal, dropping knowledge about health and meditation and breathing and all of this stuff, I don't know, I might have gotten into it a little bit sooner. It was always like the old crusty farts that were telling me how to be healthy, and I wasn't interested in, learning about blue light or sleep or any of that stuff.
Absolutely.
So we're going to rock it, dude. So you're not only my youngest guest, but you might be the world's youngest biohacker. So how did you get into this stuff? Like, how come you're not at a frat house right now, like working on a kegger and like banging chicks? Like, what are you doing sitting here talking about health with a guy like me for?
Well, it's a long story, but I want to get to the good stuff. So basically, there was a time in my life when I was growing up and I just wasn't questioning the things that were going on. I was just living it. I was having fun for sure, just going through school. I ran track and field in middle school. I was having an awesome time. But as I got into high school, I just slowly started to feel worse and worse every day. And, a lot of my friends, a lot of people I know, most people I know, I'd say just don't feel really good on a daily basis. They're tired. People's number one complaint I've heard in school is just, I'm so tired. I'm so stressed. And yeah, there's a huge component to this from, all the homework kids are being assigned, all that stuff, being told what to do, doing 5 clubs and a sport all at the same time. But still, I talked to my grandpa. He said when he was growing up, kids, they did a lot of stuff too, but they just weren't so tired. They had more energy. And, I just see this stark distinction. And the reason I came to it was because in my life, it was a real problem. And, most of my friends kind of hadn't questioned things. I sure hadn't. But freshman year, it was so bad, stomach issues I was having. I was getting migraines every day, actually. That was one of the biggest issues. And honestly, it was just bringing me down. I couldn't enjoy myself.
When people say they get migraines, I never know what that means. Like when I get a headache, every once in a while I have a headache, but what was it like subjectively for you to experience that? You're in high school trying to study, like you have a headache. Is a migraine bigger than a regular headache or does it last longer? What's the distinction? I'm just curious.
Imagine someone put a balloon inside of your head and started blowing it up. So you have a real strong tension building, but it's not like a balloon of air. It's like a balloon of lead and it's just heavy and pressurized and it's just someone's pushing the pressure up. And then the worst, I would say a migraine is when that balloon pops, but imagine the popping sensation on repeat for just ever. And it isn't like pop, pop, pop. It's more just like a constant, just horrible, horrible pain. I mean, I remember a time in middle school, and again, I wasn't even questioning a thing at this age still, despite how I was feeling. I was sitting at the lunch table and there was all this noise going on, all this stuff. And I was just in such pain that I just put my head down and I was almost about to cry at the table. My head was in so much pain. I went to class and I was like, Mrs. Schwartz, my teacher, I need to go to the nurse. It's terrible. The nurse sent me back. I was laying in the nurse again after I went back there because I just couldn't focus in class. And, I don't know, she gave me a little water and some saltine crackers or something, but I've never been, I don't think, more miserable than that. And I actually left. My dad came to pick me up. I had to wait 45 minutes. It was just pure misery. And I actually threw up on the curbside leaving because of, that's something that sometimes happens in migraines. So, that was probably one of the more severe headaches I ever had. But it was really bad. And those kinds of things were becoming more and more common. That was my 8th grade year of high school or of middle school. But then as I got into high school, there was a period when I actually had a headache that went on for 3 weeks straight. And I actually went to the ER because I just had this headache that just wouldn't go away. And they pumped me full of these saline IVs with all kinds of drugs to break the migraine. But again, they never asked why. And I still wasn't questioning anything at this point. Not at all. And so, the one thing I remember that was kind of telltale, it was like a little omen for the future, was I was sitting in this room. I didn't know a thing about light or health, but the lights, the fluorescent lighting, the whole ceiling was just fluorescent lights, these bright white lights. And I was like, Mom, these need to go off. I just can't even deal with it. And that's what most sick people are actually under all the time. I mean, just think about that. That's definitely not good. And we're going to talk more about why that's not good, but that actually makes people worse. So I've talked with a lot of people lately who have gone to hospitals and they've actually gotten sicker, since they went to the hospital, and they're like, oh, thank God we were in the hospital when all this bad stuff started to happen. Like, would have been terrible if we weren't in the hospital, but they don't realize that sometimes this environment, believe it or not, actually can cause these health issues. And this is the thing that's really gotten me interested, is that I always thought that our body was just kind of like some kind of determinism where you're born and things just go the way they go and you don't really have much influence. So, we eat crappy food, we do all this stuff, and we don't realize that the body that we have is directly created by the environment. Directly. I mean, what we're doing.
What was your lifestyle like? Were you eating healthy food and doing sports and stuff like that? Or were you on the standard American, the SAD diet?
Yeah, I was definitely on the SAD diet. Actually, it was sadder than that, believe it or not. So, most people, they're
eating Hot Pockets and shit.
Well, not quite. So I thought I was doing good for myself. This is the craziest part. I was a vegetarian for 7 years, from probably 7 to 13, because I had this experience with these disgusting factory farm raised hot dogs and a bunch of high fructose corn syrup laid in ketchup. And I threw up and I was like, oh, meat's disgusting. At age 7, I was like, this is disgusting. I don't want to have any more of it. I'm going to be a vegetarian. It's healthier for me. Red meat's bad. And I never looked at any science. I never questioned it, but I was just tell people like, oh, red meat's so bad for you, just because it's on the news. And that's the thing is, people, a lot of the time we make claims because a lot of people say it and it's just a fallacy of authority, that some authority saying it. And, I could never have explained how. I just say, oh, it's obvious. It's on the news. It's on CNN. And that's kind of one of the biggest things I'd like to get into tonight is this.
Oh, I can't wait. I love talking about fake news.
Yeah, well, fake news
there's
is...
a lot. It's not a new phenomenon. I mean, it's always been. Well, that's the thing, dude, in health too, Matt. I mean, you're a bit younger, so you might not have seen some of the waves and trends, but, there was the eras where fat was bad for you because certain fats, like vegetable oils, are bad for you, but there's fats that are actually good for you. And I mean, I remember people, they used to like show a cheeseburger and be like, oh, here's a heart attack waiting to happen. It's like, no, actually eating vegetable oil will give you a heart attack. There's so much misinformation, and a lot of it is perpetuated by the people selling you stuff. But then even within the health world and like what we call the biohacking world is just kind of extreme health nuts. Sometimes we are really nuts. I include myself in that. Is that there's a lot of memes and misinformation even within this, So there's trends like it's bone broth one week, and then it's green juices, and then it's this and it's that. But it's funny the way that things sort of are cyclical like that. And I've watched them, just having been around for a while, come in and out over time,
Yeah.
So okay, so you're vegetarian for 7 years. Do you think that had anything to do with the fact that your health was starting to fail? I mean, that's really young,
Absolutely.
dude. I felt like a beast until I was maybe 25, and I was not only eating junk food, but I was like literally putting junk, like street junk, in my body. I was destroying myself, and I still felt pretty good unless I like partied too hard. So what was the deal with that?
The thing is that...
Because I was talking to someone today, and they're like, oh, dude, you need to go raw vegan. Da, da, da. I was like, yeah, I was a vegetarian for 10 years. Like, I think I gave it a pretty good shot.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Definitely. Well, the thing is that, first of all, in regards to these health trends you're talking about, something that I just can't help but notice is that, if we look into nature and we look at every other species, there's no other species talking about health trends and, what's going to be the best little food that I'm going to eat. Simply they live controlled and dictated by their environment and in harmony with it. And so obviously humans are the only animal that's gotten a brain big enough to actually change that. So this fundamental disconnect has created issues. And so we're going to be talking about the fundamental disconnect that's occurred that's leading people to think, oh, I need to go down this health trend or that health trend to find my health. And really, the funny thing is the fact that they're trends, the fact that they're always changing, proves that none of them actually are the answer. None of them actually work 100%, because if they did, then one would stick and it'd be clear that this is the answer. But obviously, there's no one size fits all for health. All organisms are different. I was just thinking about this on the drive up. I just drove up from Philadelphia, had lots of time to think. And, you look at people say, oh, this diet's best for people. This diet's best for people. Well, you look at people in, Siberia and people on the equator. How are we going to say that this is the healthiest diet for humans, X, Y, or Z? Because they're completely different. They're in completely different environments. I mean, you look at wild animals and we hardly see such diversity between even wild animals as humans, because we're the only one that's been able to spread across the entire globe. And so we've obviously adapted completely differently. And to say we're going to eat the same thing and we're all going to be healthy is like saying that, you could just, I don't know, make an education system that's going to address every single student with the exact same, just stuff.
which is what we have.
Well, we're going to talk about that too. But
all right,
interesting that comes
so take
up.
me back to what do you think the root of your health issues was? To start having your health fail in middle school is ridiculous. What was the problem?
Well, I mean, I know now my mitochondria were trashed, and high school was when it got really bad. It was a downhill. You said you were feeling great growing up. A lot of my friends, a lot of people I know, they're doing pretty well. They feel good, they're young, but there was a combination of factors for me. So one, I was born in vitro fertilization. So I was actually conceived in a Petri dish, which is a way that people, so a lot of people today, this is common, infertility rates are skyrocketing. So people use in vitro fertilization to get pregnant, which means you mix the sperm and the egg from the mom and the dad in a glass dish, and then they put it into the mom. So I was actually exposed to the world earlier than most. And so that actually, I haven't read too deep in all the details, but that alone is kind of a disconnect. Then I was born through cesarean section. So they cut my mom's stomach open. I'm a triplet, actually. So out of in vitro fertilization came triplets.
Whoa.
Yeah. So my mom, we all came out of my mom's stomach, which is common for triplets. But the thing is, we're designed to come out the vagina because you get all of this bacteria that actually stays with us our entire lives. And, it changes. But that's where we get the kind of the root.
You get inoculated.
Inoculated. And so I didn't get that. And that's actually, for people interested, just look up gut flora. And there's thousands of research papers now on this and how it's critical for health. So I didn't get that. Then I was, I became a vegetarian. So I was depriving myself of DHA, the critical fats for our brain from fish and seafood, because I wasn't eating that. And then I wasn't eating protein. So I was also skinny, really, really pale and unhealthy. And to compound the issue, I was in school under all these bright fake lights. I was running. I was a runner. So only later did I learn that running can be a great exercise for sure. But I was in such a damaged state that running was actually kind of like using an overdrawn credit card. I was bursting out my energy levels, but there was no real energy behind it to back it up. So I was creating long-term oxidative damage in all my tissues and everything. And so I stopped running once I started getting into all this health stuff. But to tell you when the light bulb switch came, and this was really interesting, it was almost like a coincidence. It was a coincidence. But basically, someone had told me when I was younger, I think my mom, I credit her so much for always being slightly against the grain. She didn't vaccinate us with all the vaccines. She tried to buy organic. So we did have that kind of good exposure, thankfully. She used her maternal instinct. Women have great instincts for sure, about the health of their children and everything. So I ate these French fries one time and I got a big acne breakout on my face. And I remember her saying that happens when you eat all these fries. And I thought, maybe my gut's damaged. I mean, how else could it possibly happen that I get this big acne breakout? And it was all out of vanity, actually. I just don't want to have acne on my face. So I started looking deeper and I found out, my gut probably is damaged. I have all these symptoms that seem to correspond. And that led me to something that I saw called the Whole30, the Repair a Damaged Gut diet. And that led me to something called the paleo diet, which is this eating evolutionarily, eating like our ancestors. But again, it's kind of trying to slap a one-size-fits-all onto different types of people. Anyway, though, I tried it and I got such good results. This is the first time I tried a real health overhaul in my life.
So did you do the Whole30 legit, like followed it to the T?
I mean, I actually didn't want to pay for their program. So I just looked up paleo and I was like, I'm going to do this. And what I did in 1 week, I went from being a vegetarian. I had actually started eating some white chicken meat, like in the form of disgusting deep fried chicken tenders and stuff. But anyway, so I wasn't quite a vegetarian anymore, just eating white meat, chicken. So I started eating a lot more chicken. I cut out in 1 week all grains, all dairy, all refined sugars, and all refined vegetable oils in 1 week. So
you must have felt good, I bet, in
dude,
1 week, right?
I felt so good, so much better. It was like, that's the reason why I'm here.
Will you tell people about vegetable oils, like what they're called, what they do? Like why
it's simple enough, but most people don't know this actually, so it's a good place to go. Vegetable oils are not actually made from vegetables, interestingly enough. They're refined seed oils. So they take the seeds from corn, from rapeseed, also known as canola, most commonly soybeans, and then sunflower. There's so many different kinds of seed oils. But basically, anything that's an oil, and you look at it and you're like, I don't think I could get oil from that if I tried myself. For example, you could get oil from olives. You could get oil from avocados because they're fatty. But things like little seeds, they have to put them through these industrial pressers at massively high temperatures in order to get any oil out. So not only are they using these, just pressing it and refining it, but the heat that they're using totally oxidizes and damages all this stuff. So it's just like inflammation waiting to happen. And that's the fat that we build our membranes out of, where we communicate, and that's how all of our cells work. So right off the bat, I was learning about this stuff.
And hormones.
Hormones are built out of these fats. Yeah. So we're literally setting the stage to build ourselves out of crap, and how do you think your life's going to be if you're building yourself out of shit, basically? It's not going to be good. You're not going to feel great. So the thing is, these vegetable oils are now, I've read somewhere like 10 to 20% of the average person's caloric intake, because they're in everything and they're fat. So they do take up a lot of calories. So anything that you buy, any cookies or cakes or chips or anything from the store, they don't use butter anymore. They don't use, any kind of natural fat or olive oil or something. They use vegetable oil because it's cheap. And so what we're eating is we're basically eating, this is funny. People talk about how animals in factory farms are eating all this disgusting food. They're feeding them the cheapest stuff. That's what's happening to us too, but people just don't realize it. So we're being fed the most disgusting, cheap stuff, and that's all of our junk food. And yeah, people, love this stuff. Tastes good. It gives you a good neurotransmitter boost when you eat it. But in the long run, we don't realize how that's altering our health. So that's basic stuff. I mean, we're going to get way beyond food.
And so also when you say that those seed oils get oxidized, that is basically, for people that are listening, what he's saying is those become free radicals. And I'm sure most people are familiar with that. Like if you take antioxidants, like you eat your blueberries, your acai, whatever, those are free radical antioxidants, scavenge free radicals. They go after them. And free radicals are these fucked up little things that run around your body and cause inflammation or wreak havoc and cause aging. Is that getting that right?
Caveat is that they actually, free radicals don't get the message that they're all bad because they sound radical, you know.
Right.
They're actually, mitochondria are engines in our cells make free radicals in order to signal.
Dude, you just
so they're
reminded me
really
of something.
important.
The hydrogen only goes after the bad free radicals, not the good ones.
Great.
Yeah, it's trippy. Okay, so I want to put a bow on the health story. So you're eating essentially like, because I relate a lot to this too, of thinking I'm eating a healthy diet, being a vegetarian and all this stuff, but eating really a pro-inflammatory diet because you're getting all these seed oils. And dude, they're so hard to avoid, man, because I went to Whole Foods last night and it's like, I already know every packaged food, dude, in Whole Foods, unless they're advertising and using it as a marketing tool and it says like no canola oil, no seed oil, which a lot of the paleo stuff kind of will. Not that the packaged paleo food is good for you by any stretch, a lot of it. But I was like, what the hell? I wanted some guacamole. So I'm like, I need some kind of chips. I'm not just going to eat guacamole with a goddamn spoon. So I picked up maybe like 5 packages and I'm just looking, canola oil.
Yeah, they all have it.
Everything. And then you go to the bar where they sell like the hot food, look at the ingredients, every single thing's canola oil.
Yeah, it's the cheapest
But
oil.
what it'll say, non-GMO, expeller pressed. It's like, dude, it's still inflammatory. It might not be GMO, so maybe it's not damaging your DNA or something, doing some weird mutant shit that GMOs do, but it's still totally whack.
Yeah.
So what was like the catalyst, the bottom, where you just finally hit that bottom, feeling like shit, you kind of said it, and then you adopt sort of a Whole30 paleo thing? What was the next step?
I said that earlier, the migraines was the worst time of my life, but this was even worse because then I was kind of helpless and I accepted it, like ignorance is bliss. But now I thought, I'd already gone, I should mention, to, normal doctors. I'd gone to allergists because I had really bad allergies. I didn't even mention that, like horrible pollen allergies, just the worst. Like I couldn't even think some days. And I had dust allergies. So indoors, outdoors, I was never safe, right, basically. But I saw naturopaths even and had done certain diets with them and it kind of helped, but none of it really, really proved a solution. So once I did paleo, I felt great because I cut out all these toxic foods. But the thing is, this diet requires us to go on to this more fat burning type protocol where we cut out all those refined sugars and they say, cut out the sugars, now you're going to burn fat. And that's this huge dialogue and debate between these food-focused people. They say, no, eat this ratio of carbs, this ratio of fats, eat this much and this much. And they're trying to find the perfect ratio. And they're all like spending their lives fighting over which is superior. And it's just like two people, fighting over something. And the entire premise under it is wrong. It's like two people fighting over, which planet is purple in the Earth's solar system when none are. It's like, but like which one, this one, that one, this one, that one, but not, it's like there's no solid ground under it. So anyway, I was unable to handle that fat burning diet with all those heavy fats. And because what I know now is my mitochondria, which are the engines in our cells, and there's thousands of them in every single of our 100 trillion cells, they make energy for us. Mine couldn't burn fat effectively because they were really damaged. And we're going to talk about why they're damaged. That's kind of the main focus here, in terms of how our environment and the things we're doing really can damage our health. So basically, I went on a year-long kind of quest since the paleo diet. It went from one diet to, my issues kind of came back. They always say, you got to find that one food that's causing your problem. So I just try to cut out the next food, just over and over again, trying to find a solution. And, I kept cutting stuff out till I was literally like starving myself, doing these bone broth only diets with just bone broth and like really well cooked meats to just be easy on my gut. Because again, all they talk about is the gut. You got to heal your gut. Health will come. And so none of that stuff was working for me. And it just kept getting worse. And, there's still people, they might say, you didn't do this one thing right. But I literally tried so much of it. Autoimmune protocol diets, the GAPS diet, gut and psychology syndrome. I did all of these things and I went through and I was doing it all myself. I mean, thank God my mom was supportive. She'd help. I was cooking. This is cool. After my freshman year of high school, I started cooking every meal for myself. Yeah, my mom always wants to help me out. But once I got into this stuff, it's like she can't cook 5 different meals. So I got to kind of take charge. And I did. So I'm a great chef. I cook really well. People just love my food when I cook it because I've had 4 years of experience. But it came to this point where I was kind of throwing my hands up in the air again. It was like, all right, now I know that I could potentially solve my issues. And these people all say they have the answer. And it seemed to work at first, but now it doesn't. So what do I do? Well, eventually I was so obsessed with this diet stuff. I went on these really strict diets, but here's the problem. I mentioned I couldn't burn fat. My body needed sugar. And this is common for people today. Just think about how you eat, the average person, who's watching this. Maybe someone who's in the health world doesn't do this, but most people I know just, they need many meals a day. If they don't get a meal for a few hours, their blood sugar goes way down. They get really hungry and angry because they don't have any food. Their mitochondria can't tap into their fat stores and burn the fat that they have there. And so that's a huge issue because you have all these people, the majority of our society now, because we have damaged mitochondria, we need to run on sugar. It's called a Warburg metabolism, basically. It's a guy who studied cancerous cells, found that this characteristic of these cancerous cells was that they could only burn sugar because they lost the more complex functions of beta oxidation, which is how we burn fats. And so we actually have a whole society with precancerous cells, basically, because we can't burn our fat. And that might sound like a kind of long shot, but we'll get into the details of how it works. Basically, though, what that means is you eat your big bowl of Cheerios in the morning, your cereal full of sugars, basically, because all those carbs break down to sugars. That's what they are. And then your insulin level and your blood sugar level go up together. Blood sugar goes up, insulin goes up to store it as fat. Insulin stores your blood sugar as fat. Because if your blood sugar level's too high in your bloodstream, you could die. And that's what some people have diabetes. That's what the issue is, that where insulin isn't functioning properly, so they can have excess blood sugar or too low blood sugar. But anyway, we're on an insulin roller coaster. You eat, blood sugar level goes up, insulin goes up, stores it all as fat. And then you can't tap into those fat stores and burn fat for the next few hours, which we're naturally supposed to do. In nature, you wouldn't be able to get, a banana or a bowl of Cheerios every few hours or some chips. You'd have to, go hours or days sometimes without food. You have to burn your own fat. And so we lose this function, and we have a society now of obese people because they store on the fat because they're eating the sugar it stores as fat, and then they can never burn it off. So it's just like adding more to the fat stores, more to the fat stores, more to the fat stores, but they can never tap into it and burn it off. And for people interested, this is called leptin resistance, because leptin is a hormone our fat makes, and it goes to our brain and says to our brain, hey, brain, we have excess fat. Let's start burning it off. So people with leptin resistance, their brain's leptin receptor cannot receive that signal from the fat. And so the brain's saying, oh, I'm starving. Give me more food. Give me more food. Give me more food. But the fat's saying, oh, we have plenty of food. There's tons of leptin being produced. The brain just can't receive the signal. And so we literally create this huge issue of obesity in our society. And we see it. It's clear today. So for me, I knew I was onto something. I was going to keep going for it. And it was so bad. My true, honest belief of all of these paleo people, I think they're good people. They have good intentions, but they really set me down a bad path. Well, a good path, but with a lot of struggling and great learning lessons along the way. So I would be on a really strict diet, so strict where I had one piece of paper written all the foods that I could eat. And then come the weekend, I couldn't anymore sustain that diet because my cells were deprived because they didn't have that sugar. So basically, I would go with my friends and I'd have a little bit of something that I couldn't have that was on my list. And because I believed what these people were saying as if they were gods, I truly thought, oh, if I make that one mistake, it's the end of the world. I believed this stuff, that one little food was going to cause problems. Like you believe anything that you believe so truly. So in the end, I got in a whole cycle of binge dieting. It was really bad, just strict dieting, then binging. It was really bad. And eventually I learned about someone named Dr. Jack Kruse. And that's kind of where things changed for me. So this was after basically a full year of this binge dieting cycle, just extreme dieting, starving myself, being really hard on myself, still getting over that. But basically, I learned about something called the cold thermogenesis protocol, this really cool thing where you can go into cold water and maximize your physiology like crazy.
All right. So we're going to go in there. I got to unpack some of the shit you just talked about, and then we're going to go into this next phase, okay?
Let's do it.
All right, dude. So I'm going to just back up a little bit here because I like where we're going with the ice bath thing and all that. I'm like obsessed with cold. This room's a little too cold right now, but I want to back up because you talked about the leptin resistance. You talked about how all these other diets are failing. I mean, I think you exhausted all of the options in terms of like different food programs that you could have. But there's
more or
one
less.
word that you didn't mention that I want to cover because it's an interesting one, and it's also one of those trends or buzzwords right now, and that is the ketogenic diet and being in ketosis. Because what happened for me was when I stopped being a vegetarian because I was really sickly and it just wasn't serving me anymore personally, I started on bulletproof coffee and I just got on a high-fat diet. And I didn't even know what ketosis was or what ketones were or a ketogenic diet. I just started eating so much fat that I just stopped eating anything else except like some vegetables, some good clean meats, some raw egg yolks, some seafood, and lots of coconut oil, lots of brain octane oil, the bulletproof brain octane oil. I love that shit. I put it on everything to this day. But what happened was I was in ketosis all the time because I just stopped eating carbs and sugar. I wasn't eating any fruit. I was basically on a really hardcore paleo diet without even trying. Just happened to me. And then what happened is my sleep got trashed. Dude, I started waking up in the middle of the night like all hyper. I was getting these cortisol spikes and shit, just really weird sleep patterns. And I was working with Dave Asprey at that time doing coaching with him. And he's like, dude, I'm like, what happened? I'm doing your coffee. I'm not drinking coffee at night. I'm have one in the morning. I don't eat all day. He's like, dude, you're in ketosis. You got to do cyclical ketosis where you go in and out of it. Otherwise, what happens is your adrenals get jacked. So can you explain maybe in simpleton terms like what I mean by ketosis? Because you talked about being a fat adapted person.
Absolutely.
And then we'll go into like the behavioral stuff, but I want to wrap up this one dietary piece.
Yeah, well, basically, ketosis is the state that we go into naturally when we are burning fat.
Which is what you
instead of
described
sugar.
earlier, essentially,
Yeah,
right?
so if I'm not mistaken, we can go into ketosis just between meals because we're no longer burning the sugar that's left in our bloodstream. We're starting to oxidize fat in our fat stores and use ketones. That's why it's called ketosis. We create these things called ketones, which are actually an alternate source of fuel to glucose that we use to fuel our brain and other parts of our body. And they have all kinds of fantastic effects. People like Dave Asprey make these oils that can help people get into ketosis to get these brain boosting cognitive effects. Now, here's the interesting thing in regards to what we were talking about. He mentioned cyclical ketosis to not burn out your adrenals. I wish I could explain all the steps in detail. This would probably take way too long. But basically, we are designed to be in cyclical ketosis if we live in an environment where ketosis is supposed to happen. So if you live on the equator, for example, let's say you're a connected human and you're eating like a wild animal. You're eating what you're finding from scavenging, from fishing, from hunting, and from grabbing what you can off trees and everything. Now, obviously, these people are never going to enter ketosis because they're always burning carbs, and they can because they have ultraviolet light year-round. Now, we're going to get into that. But basically, that means...
Oh, shit. Okay, I see where you're going.
They are connected to the environment in a way that allows their mitochondria, which are their fuel producers or their engines. They're like 12-cylinder Ferrari engines, thousands in every cell. We don't even take care of them like someone might take care of their couple $1 million Ferrari. But if you're someone who lives in Siberia or Alaska or even Philadelphia or New York City, the natives here would be in ketosis for many months of the year because once, the fall passes by November to probably November to April, you probably can't grow anything here. So that's about 5 months where you're going to be in ketosis. You're going to be getting fish out of the river. You're going to be getting whatever else you can. A lot of the time sleeping longer because the days are so short. And getting a lot of energy probably from fire. A lot of people use fires, or Native Americans use fires, every night from what we've gathered. And that's a way to get infrared light, which can actually make ATP in the mitochondria with no food. Now, that's really cool. Yeah.
Dude, okay, so this explains why I'm so obsessed with my infrared sauna and my Juve red light therapy device.
Yeah.
So we're kind of mimicking, because I always think about the sun, but I never thought about fire itself.
Yeah, man. Well, fire's been something that natives have used. Every native people that moved away from the equator that I'm aware of uses fire. I mean, because once you develop the technology, you understand how to do something and it's providing a benefit, basically releasing stored energy from the environment that we can utilize as an organism. We are going to take advantage of that. And so it's not like we forget how to do that. We're going to make that work. So basically, in regards to ketosis, when you're in cold, that primes your mitochondria, that primes your engines to do basically fat burning, to get into ketosis. When we're in cold, it triggers cold receptors on our skin to start telling our fat to start making something called leptin, which is this hormone. And leptin, if we're leptin sensitive, if our brain's working properly in order to receive leptin, the leptin signal, then when leptin goes to our brain, we're able to send a signal back to the fat and say, hey, fat, start increasing mitochondrial energy production. So when we're in a naturally cold environment, we're able to utilize this fat burning state much more readily. So if we look at nature, I mean, I'm not saying that we can't, as a more intelligent man in some ways with more knowledge, do hacks like infrared saunas and all these kinds of things to improve our health, even though we're not necessarily in nature the way that it was. But we can see that we have these not only daily rhythms in our bodies, circadian rhythms that are dictated by the daily light cycles, but also seasonal rhythms. And so when we're in a cold climate, we're supposed to be in ketosis by nature. When we're in high ultraviolet light, which is what allows all of these fruits to grow, then we can handle eating those better. We're designed to eat those. So actually, fruits and things like that, they actually store less energy than, for example, fats. You know, for 1 gram of sugar, of glucose, you can make 36 ATP, or the ratio is 36 to 145. So for a certain amount of glucose, you're making 36 ATP. From a certain amount of fat, stearic acid, saturated fat, you can make 145 ATP. So even though it's the same amount of that substance by weight, you can make so many more ATP from the fat because it's storing so much more energy. It's condensed because an animal ate a plant and then another animal ate that animal. So it's kind of condensing more energy over time. So when we're in strong sunlight, we can actually eat that lower energy food, carbohydrates, and actually still be very, very healthy. Whereas when we're, 2 years ago on a foreign exchange in Bosnia and Herzegovina in Eastern Europe, the people there ate much more seasonally. So in the winter, my host mom was making much more thick, dense, fatty stews and everything. And in the summer, it was like light salads. They hardly ate. And I was like, what? Why don't they eat so much? I'm so hungry. It's this, they're like, oh, we don't eat much in the summer. And I was like, why? I just didn't really get it. But it's starting to make so much more sense.
Because they're still living in accordance with their natural environment more because they haven't been totally westernized. Their culture's still sort of intact, right?
Yeah. I mean, they still have a lot of disconnects, but they're still retaining a lot more than we are. And for that reason, they were a lot healthier. And that's
or maybe
the
just,
thing.
In a dietary sense. I mean, I'm sure they still have their EMFs and all this shit like we
but
do.
Not as bad.
So this is trippy, dude. So essentially, as I understand history, all mankind came from the equator more back, right? And then sort of branched out as we were able to do. And so now you'll have someone with really dark skin, an African person of origin that's living in goddamn, Iceland or Saskatchewan or some shit, who's like not eating their native diet from where they came from, or Brazilian or whoever, right? Where someone, like when you go to Rio, dude, you're so on the equator. I remember I went there and I'm like Mr. Sun. I'm in the sun all the time. I'm from LA. And everyone's like, dude, you need to put on sunscreen. I'm like, psh, sunscreen. I go out there for a couple hours. I got like bubbles all over me.
Oh my gosh.
Not even like sunburn, but literally like my skin boiled.
Yeah.
It was bizarre. I was like, oh, this is different. Like the equator is a different universe, literally.
Yeah.
So, but approaching that from what you should eat and also based on season, this is getting into some trippy shit. So I'm digging it. I don't know where I'm going with that other than just like, I like this. Let's do more.
Yeah. So, all right.
Okay.
So I think I know where we're going with this.
Because
So
I was talking to my assistant here, Lisa, today. And she was like, oh, you should be eating fruit and eating carbs and this and that. I'm like, dude, I feel like shit when I eat a lot of carbohydrates and fruit because then I'm obsessed with eating. Like I have to constantly keep refueling. It's a pain in the ass. But when I eat a high fat, moderate protein, some vegetable diet, like I forget to eat for 8 hours. I love it because I have other shit to do. I don't want to be obsessing about, okay, where are we going to order food and where do you want to eat? I don't know. Where do you want to eat? It's like so much wasted decision fatigue.
Oh, yeah.
And just the time to sit there and chew a goddamn salad. Like I'd rather throw a couple things in the Vitamix, get it done and get back to podcasting, But it's interesting now what you're saying because she lives in New York City where, it's freezing half the time and she's living like this La Vida high carb diet, living La Vida high carb.
Yeah.
And, but it's working for her apparently, but probably eats that way in the winter here, not only the summer. But I think most people like get caught up on, oh, you should be vegan, you should be raw, you should be paleo, Whole30, Atkins, whatever the fuck. And it's like, actually what you're saying is it might even be deeper than that not only seasonal eating, but geographic eating. So let's dive into that because that's fascinating.
Yeah, well, something that I can't help but throw in because it's so foundational, and to skip over would just be to skip over the real crux of the issue. So we're talking about food. We have to talk about how food's used in the body. So if you're talking about, for example, the gas of a car, you wouldn't just, throw around like, oh, I'm using this gas and that gas. The first question someone's going to ask is, what kind of car do you have? What kind of engine's in that car? You know what I mean? Like, oh, I use premium. Oh, I use plus.
Funny.
But wait, what kind of car do you have, right?
Dude,
so,
in my car, I have to use synthetic oil, for example.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, so,
I can't just go to the gas station and buy whatever oil. It has to be fake oil. Yeah,
so this is might be one of the more important things that we talk about is if you're having a conversation about food, think of it like a conversation about gas. You couldn't even continue the conversation without clearly stating, I have this kind of car or that kind of car, this kind of engine, it's this old, this new. But yet everyone in the food world who's talking about food all the time isn't even defining what kind of car you have, what kind of engines in your body to use that food. And that's kind of a big problem when you think about it, because it's like a bunch of people screaming at each other like, you got to use premium. Oh, you got to use this kind, that kind, this kind, that kind. But no one's even specifying that foundational premise of what kind of car do you have, what kind of engine is in the car. And it's pretty simple stuff. Do you mind if I dig into mitochondria just a wee bit?
Go nuts. So all the shit that I do, basically, that people see on social media, on the podcast, is to fuel my mitochondria. And then they're like, well, what is that? I go, that's the stuff that makes ATP, and ATP gives you energy. And that's as much as I know.
All right, so I hope you learn something from this. So there's a guy named Dr. Doug Wallace. If anyone's interested in this stuff, look him up, Doug Wallace on YouTube. Great videos. But he's the founder.
We'll put him in the show notes.
For sure.
And by the way, for those of you that want to get the show notes, you can go to lukestory.com/contact and just fill that out. Just give me your name and your email, and every week I'll send you the show notes, including this one right here with Doug Wallace and all these MFers that we're talking about. So carry on.
One of the things that you should throw in the show notes, I have a video on my YouTube channel, Matt Maruca, Maruca, called The Most Important Factor for Optimal Health. Now, I just put that out there. Just a little provocative title to get people interested, but it's really cool. It goes deep into what I'm about to simplify. But basically, went and met with Dr. Doug Wallace, the founder of the science of mitochondrial genetics and medicine. He's been working on it for 40 years. I was just actually at lunch today with one of my mom's friends who works at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where he works, and who actually was part of the team that recruited him to come to that hospital. So he actually knows him pretty well. And I asked him, how would you describe this guy, Dr. Wallace? And he said, he is a genius. He's a solo kind of guy. He follows his own path. And that's pretty characteristic of scientists who make really big revolutions like Galileo, guys like these. So I consider this guy the Galileo of biology. I wrote a blog post about it on my blog, mattmaruca.com, called Meeting Biology's Galileo. For people more interested, basically though, I went and met with him because, I had this connection. It was really lucky. And I asked him, because it didn't make sense to me. We learned in biology class basically that the reason that all eukaryotic cells exist, so eukaryotic cells, it's basically a way of saying multicellular organisms. So any organism that has more than one cell. So the non-multicellular organisms are two kinds of life. Bacteria, which everyone knows, and archaea, which most people know. They live in colonies, but they are still individual organisms who support themselves as individuals, more or less. We learn basically in school, a lot of people forget this, obviously, once you graduate from high school, you haven't had biology in 40 years, you might not even know what we're talking about, but you'll get it after this. So these two bacteria combined, and they created this kind of bacterial supercell that we call a eukaryotic cell, not a prokaryotic cell, but eukaryotic cell. And what prokaryotic means before a nucleus, eukaryotic means after a nucleus. So what happened is there's a nucleus in all of our cells. People know this, and it contains our genes. And the reason that nucleus exists is because it's kind of like the two bacteria combined, and the nucleus is kind of part of the one bacteria. Now, that bacteria was called an archaeobacteria. Now, the other kind of bacteria was called an oxidative cyanobacteria. So in your average cell, now just keep in mind the average adult human has about 100 trillion of them. 100 trillion cells in the average adult human. And each of those cells has one of these archaeobacteria. Now, all of the other bacteria in that cell, thousands of them, in each of our cells is an oxidative cyanobacteria, also known today as a mitochondria. I asked him, how did the merging of these two things allow for all of this extra complexity? I mean, it just didn't make sense to me. And what he basically told me was that when these bacteria joined together, it was basically like the host kind of saw all of these individual bacteria that make energy very efficiently and said, I kind of see one issue here. You have 1,000 bacteria that are oxidative cyanobacteria making lots of energy. But what they do is, Dr. Wallace basically told me, what all life does is it takes energy from the environment and it uses that energy to prevent the processes of decay. So basically, if you think you don't have energy, you're dead. Your body's going to start rotting. So we create structure using energy from the environment. So all the stuff we're talking about, getting food from the environment, that's stored energy. And it all is coming from sunlight foundationally. And he's talked about this a lot. Infrared from your sauna, that's energy. Sunlight. So we're just literally bunches of matter that are structured by energy from the environment. And for whatever reason, we can't talk about causes. It's really difficult because we don't know. But life is this phenomena that is trying to capture as much energy from the environment as possible to go further and further away from that state that we call equilibrium, which is death. People say, oh, get your life in balance, go to equilibrium. But what that actually means is death. So you do not want to go to equilibrium.
Dude, this is trippy. You also just described the nature of the ego. That's why the unseen hand, the creator, gave human beings this other identity, this false identity, the ego. I mean, coming at it from a spiritual place, because the ego is rapacious. It's always taking, and it's out feeding for energy of whatever type, whether that's attention with, the Ferrari that you mentioned, or the hot girl under your arm, or the career title, or your social media followers, or whatever, or even on the downside of ego, which is kind of like feeling less than the other people that have it. In other words, competition is the nature of ego.
Yeah,
it's so
sure
interesting,
is.
And all of our instincts for food, for this energy that we're trying to get, come from that God-given thing. That's why it's a bit of a digression here. But that's
totally
why it's fucking
related.
pointless to try to get rid of your ego. If you're like a spiritual seeker, it's not going to happen. But you can put it at bay so that it doesn't run your life.
Just become familiar with your ego. Understand it. I
love that correlation, because that need that all humans have is like, we're just looking for energy. It's 50% that, and it's 50% aversion, how we're trying to keep ourselves safe and protected from harm, which also has the ultimate end, which is death. So all of human life is basically just based on our survival instincts.
Absolutely.
And if we don't have that self-awareness, then you become pathologically fucking psychotic in an effort to take more than you actually need. And this is every greedy politician, every, person that people that in history that go down as a-holes basically are all people that are just trying to take too much energy.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, it's interesting. So
I
just made that correlation. I had to mention
very much connected.
But let's carry on with what you're talking about as the different, because I also like that it's all coming from the sun. That's what's interesting to me, is that no matter what kind of diet you eat, in order for you to stay alive, you have to eat dead stuff that's soaked up energy from the sun and nutrients from the earth, from rock and dirt, soil, all this stuff, microorganisms in the soil and water, of course. And then you take that energy, or you, like you said, you're just eating other things that ate other things that ate other things that ate other things who ate that energy. So like there's certain plants that we can't eat, so we got to eat the animals that eat those plants. I'm not going to go eat a goddamn field of alfalfa, but a cow can do it for me, concentrate that energy. Or a salmon can eat a bunch of algae and generate a bunch of omega-3s and DHA and concentrate it in that fat and in that protein. And then I can eat that energy, which came from the sun through the water into the algae.
Yeah.
And this is the whole thing that goes into sun gazing and the whole breatharian possible myth of breatharians that just skip all the middlemen and just get the energy from the sun and from oxygen.
And we do. We sure do. So we've always done that since the beginning of time, and those are the foundational pieces. But we've added these other things to become more complex. Like trees, they are breatharians. They breathe the air, the CO2 from the air, and they make sugar using CO2 from the air and water. They combine them with sunlight energy, make sugar. So trees are all breatharians and sunlight and water arians.
Because they're essentially made of starch?
Yeah, well...
I mean, is that what you mean by they make sugar?
Yeah, they do, exactly. And Dr. Wallace even says plants are all just polymers of sugar. They take this energy from the environment, they split the water molecule, and they make these sugars, and they build themselves. They're just polymers of sugar, basically. They're just big... If you hit a tree, it's just a bunch of sugars bound together in really complex forms.
What I want to know is, could anyone listen to this podcast and then still be an atheist? I mean, like, how do you explain, the literally infinite number of things that happen, like reactions that happen like that, and processes that happen in nature that are so divinely intelligent? It's just crazy.
Yeah.
I love this shit.
Yeah.
Carry on. Forgive me, I get excited.
No, I love it. I love it, man. This is all what it's about. You're making these connections that people actually need to hear because, you're taking it from just an intellectual level and bringing it down to a spiritual level for people who can really connect to that. And I think that's really important. I've learned that people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. There's all these psychology studies where people are more likely to listen to someone who they trust, even if the logic isn't necessarily there. When someone's heart is open to what you're saying, then they're more likely to just believe you, even blindly. But again, that's like, in other words, the opening of the heart and the mind is more important than the actual quality of the information, for better or for worse. And this is why we all have to learn to educate ourselves about logic, because people can take advantage of that, warming you up and everything. But so back to the mitochondria.
Yes,
why are these so important? How do these run our cells, really? And why is it that if your mitochondria don't work, you die immediately? Well, it's because this merging of these two bacterias, this host bacteria we're talking about, it basically looked at all these other bacteria and it said, I'll cut you guys all a deal. I'm going to give all 1,000 or so of you mitochondria a little new home. You're all going to join me in my cell. You're going to be warm. You're going to be cozy. You're going to have protection for the rest of your life. All I'm going to do, you have 1,000 genes. Each of you of 1,000 or so have 1,000 genes. And this is where most of their energy is going to a living organism. Even these small bacteria is to build themselves and maintain themselves using these genes. So in order to save all of this energy that basically became the energy that allowed for this massive boom in complexity, this host cell looked at all these mitochondria and said, you have 1,000 genes each. I'm going to delete 97% of all of your genes. And I'm going to leave each of you with just 13 genes. So I'm now your real host. You can't leave anymore. Basically, I have all the genes to build you and nourish you. And the only genes that you're keeping in each of the mitochondria, so all mitochondria have their own genes inside of them. Those are akin to the wiring diagram of a power plant. In other words, if your mayor, New York City mayor, we're here in New York City, wants to build a power plant, he might have a big old set of plans and blueprints in his office. And he can keep them there because, once it's all said and done, the building's built, it's probably not going to change much. Once the mitochondria are built, it's all good and well. The nucleus of the cell, which is the host, doesn't necessarily need to change much. But let's just say there's an emergency in that power plant that was built. You got to have the wiring diagram on site so that they can immediately respond to a catastrophe. So that's what the mitochondrial DNA inside of the mitochondria do. And so the reason why mitochondrial DNA is important is because it's what allows for evolution and change in an organism. So this is why I was sick, basically, because my mitochondria were so damaged by my environment. They weren't functioning well. They couldn't burn fat. They couldn't produce energy well. So when your mitochondria become damaged, they can't produce energy well. That leads to disease. Now, just for people to get a little step back and think about why is that important? Well, just look at Earth from space for a second. Just zoom out. Really picture the blue, beautiful oceans in your head, the white clouds and the beautiful crust of the Earth and everything like that. Now, it's just a big old hunk of matter, right? A big old hunk of rock. Now, interestingly enough, a guy named Isaac Newton about a few hundred years ago said, in order for anything to move, you need a force to move it. There has to be a force. So let's zoom all the way back into the surface of the Earth. And now you see Luke and I moving and talking, all this stuff moving in New York City, all these cars. Well, where's all the energy coming from to move all this stuff? You know what I mean? Newton said we need energy to move stuff. Well, obviously, it's coming from the sun. The sun is the main energy source that's providing energy onto the surface of the Earth. And also, there's these geothermal vents at the bottom of the oceans that release energy. There's the Earth's magnetic field, which is a source of energy. But ultimately, the majority of it's coming from the sun. Now, in each of us, we can't actually utilize sunlight directly through certain mechanisms. But when we eat and get energy, in a way, what we're eating is stored sunlight, but how is it actually getting utilized to make us animate, to give us that force that Newton said is necessary for motion? Well, basically, mitochondria is the answer. You take energy that's stored in a certain form, put it through a mitochondria, put it through an engine, just like gas going into an engine, and it's utilized so that you can create motion. And that motion equates to every single function in our cells. There's estimates of in every single cell, every single second, 100,000 biochemical reactions occur in every single cell. That is something like 10 quintillion reactions in the body every single second. And all of the energy for all of that is all coming from the thousands of mitochondria in every single cell. So what do you think is going to happen?
So mitochondria are hella small if there's thousands in every
They're
cell,
hella
right?
small, just like bacteria that are all over these tables and couches and your skin and your mouth that you can't see. They're hella small. But this is why I asked Dr. Wallace, how did we go from these tiny things to this massive complexity? Well, the amount of energy that was saved by deleting all of those genes and only keeping 2 copies in the nucleus instead of 1,000 copies of 1,000 genes, 2 copies of those 1,000 genes, literally gave so much leftover energy. And the host cell said, hey, I'll take all this and you guys are going to have a safe place to stay. So all of us, all eukaryotic cells, these complex organisms are really just bacterial super colonies. Like you and I, we don't think of ourselves as bacteria. Well, we should start thinking of ourselves as bacteria because then we can understand our physiology better. This is all about mitochondria, about how they make energy. Again, mitochondria are our life force. I wrote a blog called Mitochondria, number 1, Your Vital Force. They're the life force. They are providing us or transmuting that energy from one form to the next so we can make it useful. Now, the reason why this is important, let's just say, for example, Luke, that you wanted to test this theory out. The first thing that I would tell you to do to test the theory out, try holding your breath for 10 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour and tell me how you fare. See, what you're doing when you hold your breath is you're obviously not getting in any oxygen. Now, the reason why we use oxygen, remember, I said that mitochondria, these bacteria, they're called oxidative cyanobacteria, which means they use oxygen to make energy. So the reason we breathe, the reason why we're constantly breathing every single second, it's like one of our main functions. And another thing people talk about, these functions in our body that we do without even thinking, that's our autonomic nervous system. We do stuff without even thinking about it. Breathing and heart beating are the first things that come to mind oftentimes. Why do we breathe? Why does our heart beat? Well, we breathe to give oxygen to our mitochondria. And why does our heart beat? Our heart beats to pump the blood that has hemoglobin on red blood cells that stores the oxygen to put it in every single cell all across the body. So we should definitely be focusing more and more on mitochondria because if you stop breathing, you're going to die. If your heart stops beating, you're going to die right away. And the reason why this is so critical is because it's feeding our mitochondria. In biology class, the cell that we look at in the textbook has maybe 3 or 4 big mitochondria just so you can see them. But people don't realize there's thousands of them in every single cell and they are our life force. It's like so important. And that's why I brought up the breathing example because if you stop breathing, you're dead. Now, what do you think happens if your mitochondria function goes down by 5% or 10%? Well, what do you think, Luke?
I don't know. You're not feeling too good.
Well, you're not feeling too good, but also your higher level functions in your body that require the most energy production are also not going to feel too good. They're just not going to work. Okay, so it's interesting. We look at our body. Where are the most mitochondria in our body?
Brain and heart.
Brain and heart have the most mitochondria. So they're using the most energy, obviously. So then,
I love that I'm getting schooled by an 18-year-old kid.
Well, thank you, man.
It's fucking awesome. This is great, dude.
Man,
you're great. You're
thank
great,
you.
man.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you've done your studying, dude. It's awesome. This is really good
Thank
stuff.
you, man. It's
and
my
I'm
passion.
hoping, there's certain points that my eyes sort of glaze over because it gets really sciencey, but I'm hoping that people, are able to catch on because where all this goes ultimately, Matt, is common sense and nature.
That's
this
right.
is always the thing that it comes back to.
Yeah.
So we're talking about all these complex, things that are going on in the body and stuff. But essentially, like as we start getting to the solution later in the episode, I'm going to tease that shit. We're not going there yet. We're going to talk about the problem first, of course, because that's really how you identify the solution. But the solution and the problem all just really have to do with us being separated from our natural environment and the ways in which we've evolved.
Yeah.
So it's
Absolutely.
fascinating stuff. I love it, dude.
Absolutely.
Okay, so mitochondria in the head and in the heart.
So we just remember, this all started with a simple digression to try to get a good foundation for all of this other stuff we're talking about that couldn't be passed over. And basically, I hope to everyone listening, you're really understanding it. Every single cell that makes you up, every single one of your 100 trillion cells can only exist because it's a symbiotic relationship between your host cell and thousands of individual mitochondria in every single cell. And so what we're saying is that when you stop breathing, or for example, cyanide does the same thing. It cuts off mitochondrial function immediately and we die like boom, soldiers take it if they get captured, so they die right away so they won't get tortured. So the real important message that relates to what Luke just said is when we disconnect from our environment in a big way, especially, our mitochondrial function starts going down. Because remember what Dr. Wallace said about us being organisms. All organisms take the energy from the environment to prevent the processes of decay. So now, if we're lowering the amount of energy we're gaining from the environment for whatever reason, we're no longer going to be able to support the higher level complex functions that we've evolved to do when we were in a higher level of energy yielding environment. So say on the east coast of Africa, where humans evolved from apes, there was so much energy there, such a rich supply of DHA, this critical omega-3 fatty acid for our brain. And it literally, this perfect kind of storm of stuff allowed for this evolution of a brain, a computer more complex than anything in the known universe. And that's actually, there's a book called Cosmo Sapiens that gets deep into it. But the human brain, as far as we know, it's the most complex thing in the universe besides the universe itself. I mean, there's so many individual pieces and so many connections between them. And that's what the definition of complexity is. This guy uses it in this book. So again, we're focused on how decreasing energy yield from the environment decreases mitochondrial function and leads to disease. Now, something that a lot of people might have heard thrown around when we're talking about mitochondria is a term called heteroplasmy. Now, if you haven't heard about heteroplasmy, it's all right, but you're going to learn a bit about it. Basically, remember how
Is that when you're attracted to the opposite sex and you have a big TV?
Not quite.
Okay.
But like,
just checking. I'm just putting the pieces together.
Man. So mitochondria, remember we said they have their own DNAs, and these genes in the mitochondria are used to build these proteins that are like the wiring diagram of the power plant. And the cool thing is that wherever you live on Earth, it's adapted to that part of the Earth. And this is why diets do not work for everyone. No standard diet will work for everyone, because the little cylinders in every single engine are completely different. So this is where the term heteroplasmy comes in. It refers to the mitochondrial DNA, and the mitochondrial DNA, all that does is it's like the blueprint to make the cylinders in an engine. But unlike a regular engine where you build the cylinders with the little plan, it's probably mostly done by machines now, but this one's changing all the time. So your engine in your car, it kind of changes over time, but not so much. This one's changing every day, every second. Everything we do is changing. And remember how many mitochondria are. They're constantly being recycled. This is changing a lot. Now, heteroplasmy refers to mitochondrial DNA. If we have a homoplasmic mitochondrial DNA, that means that our genes are the same, like homo. Now, if they're different, it's heteroplasmic, and everyone naturally has heteroplasmy.
Okay, that's where I didn't know where those words came from. Hetero and homo. Okay.
Yeah, so everyone has. Cool. So homoplasmic would be if the mitochondrial
How'd you get
DNA.
So smart, dude. Jesus Christ!
I got schooled by the master.
Jesus,
Dr. Wallace will be probably, I think, go down as more famous than Galileo. I'm being completely honest.
How many books have you read about this stuff?
Like 10, 5, 10.
Really?
But I've just listened to every podcast Dr. Cruz has ever done. Read most of his blog, and then also I was in the paleo world, following all of these guys' work. Dave Asprey, Mark Sisson. So I learned all those basics about food.
Okay.
And it's a 4-year period. So I'm in school. I don't have a full-time job. So it's like I put school on the back burner, and this is what I focused on for 4 years. So it just shows, we're going to get into schooling a little later, but it just shows how much someone can actually learn when they're no longer being managed by the school system and being force-fed with a bunch of crap. So literally, anyone who thinks that you need to be in school, just listen to what we're talking about and understand how smart anyone could actually be.
You got this smart from podcasts and YouTube.
Literally. And people make fun of it. They're like, oh, you probably read that on the internet, like some adults who don't realize the value of the good information that's out there if you know what you're looking for. But so heteroplasmy and homoplasmy. What they did, there's a cool study. They took one mitochondrial DNA from one animal. This is a really good example of why no diet works for everyone. Basically, they took the mitochondrial DNA, so kind of the plans for the engine, from one animal, and they spliced the mitochondrial DNA of another animal, a completely separate animal of the same species though, and that animal that they changed the mitochondrial DNA with ended up completely psychotic. They've done many experiments like that. So when you destroy the energy production, the higher level functions of the organism, like brain function, namely, can be completely destroyed. So that's just a basic example. That's acute, extreme, high heteroplasmy, which was done obviously in a lab. But so here's the interesting thing. What we're doing in our bodies by living in this disconnected lifestyle is actually doing a similar thing to our mitochondria over time. Because, in short, melatonin, a lot of people know about melatonin now. A lot of people take it, which is not good because it messes up our natural cycle. Melatonin is the most important molecule for repairing mitochondria, repairing mitochondrial function, keeping everything going. And again, this is such a dynamic process. This needs to be happening every single night because otherwise, if you don't sleep for like one night, you're trashed. So that just shows how important this dynamic process is. People don't think much about sleep at all. It's just like, oh, I sleep at night because everyone else does. But we sleep at night because it's repairing these functions in our body, namely our mitochondrial energy production. And so again, if you want to test this, don't sleep for a night. Pull an all-nighter, pull a double all-nighter, and tell me how you feel. That's because your mitochondria are trashed. So
does crystal meth help your mitochondria?
Well, I would imagine.
I stayed up a couple nights. I can't say I felt good, but isn't it weird though how like stimulants and methamphetamine and stuff allow you to stay up, but you pay the goddamn price.
Well,
I'm totally kidding. Obviously.
Yeah.
But it's weird that you can take like a powder, a little white powder that's made in a lab and override temporarily, trick your body into having energy.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Well, you really do. And you said, could it help mitochondrial function? I would never advocate hard drugs, obviously, because they're not going to help mitochondrial function. But in the short term, I haven't looked too deeply into certain, hard drugs. They're not exactly my focus. But I would imagine that they do something similar to increasing mitochondrial energy production like crazy temporarily, but it's like a credit card. You're buying a big $1 million house with credit cards, and then all of a sudden, you don't have any money to pay it back. And then you're broke and you're going to go to jail because you don't have any money. That's kind of what happens with these hard drugs. And so interestingly, one of the reasons I know about this is because nicotine is something I've been looking more into, because nicotine itself, a lot of people might know this, is it's technically not harmful besides the fact that it's addictive and it's in these substances like cigarettes and things that actually have much more harmful substances. But so nicotine's actually been studied for its potential role in treating certain brain issues like Alzheimer's and things like that, because it can actually acutely increase mitochondrial function. Now, again, if we don't have that kind of bank account to back it up, it's not going to be successful. But this is, someone who hasn't even necessarily dug deep into this kind of alternative world. This is my mom's friend who's a neurologist at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and the University of Pennsylvania. And he said, oh yeah, they are actually doing things like that. They're testing that. So it's really interesting to see that, what you're saying there's kind of a root of connection there for sure.
All right. So we've sort of figured out that there's no perfect diet for everyone.
Yep.
Because it depends on where you live. It depends on the season. And we've also established that you can't eat poison.
Yeah.
Seed oils. And let's just throw in any GMOs, MSG, artificial flavoring, all of artificial coloring, preservatives, just the obvious stuff that comes from any packaged food. So let's just say, you could say no matter where you are, eating food essentially from the farmer's market, whether you have less or more meat or whatever, like you want actual whole foods.
Oh, yeah.
But depending on your genes and where your ancestors are from and where you're currently living in the season, more or less of fat, protein, carbohydrates could be good for you. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then I want to get into the other shit that messes you up, like cell towers and EMFs and all the stuff we're looking at outside the window here. I know that it's not really all about diet. Once you have a clean diet, then it's more about the environmental stuff, which we're about to dive into kind of in hour 2 here, really is what's it going to, there probably is going to be a 2-part episode. So just to summarize kind of the food part, what is a recommendation in terms of like, how do we figure out what to eat then? Like the girl today is doing great on a high fruit, high sugar, high carb, clean, organic, vegan diet.
So,
like a plant-based diet. Dude, if I eat that, I'll probably like murder someone. I get so hypoglycemic and weird and moody and I turn into like a fucking teenage girl. Like I'm just like so emotional and crazy. I feel really solid and grounded eating the way I'm eating. It's working for me. And that's why I told her, I was like, thank you, for your input. I appreciate it, but I feel pretty fucking good.
Yeah.
So how does someone determine kind of what they're supposed to be eating for optimal health?
So, the person you've mentioned is a really good example of what you were just talking about before with
she's
drugs.
also 90 pounds. I'm like, dude, I'm a 6'2" man. I'm not going to live on bananas. Like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, well, so I know we don't think of carbohydrates and food as drugs, but it actually is. Again, the effects from hard drugs that you just brought up is a biologic effect, just like the effect from food. Now, obviously, one is much more prone to addiction, serious damage. It's like a poison. But food is also a drug. It has an impact on our physiology. It's a substance that impacts our physiology. So just because this person you're talking with appears to be doing fantastically doesn't mean she actually is. deep down in her tissues and body and everything. So the point that I'm making is that someone in New York City can be eating a super high carb vegan diet and feel great. But personally, most people I've talked with who are vegans, over a few years, they actually started getting skinnier. Their cognitive function started declining, and they started to experience some serious health problems. Now, this might not be the case for everyone, but this is some of my best friends who became vegans, and myself was a vegetarian for a while. And, these things occur. So what I'm saying is the best thing I would say is to go and look at what, for example, a wild animal is eating in your environment. Don't eat those things because we're all adapted to different things, but just observe the pattern. Notice what it's doing. It's getting the kind of sources of energy that are present in the environment in which we live, because these are all coupled. And what coupled means is just yoked. It means that these things are entangled together. They're timed together. They're synchronized is really what coupled means. So you want to be getting nutrition and energy that's coupled to our environment. Just like, for example, eating, a big hearty beef stew or something in the winter, or something, with more fat content. Maybe someone chooses to eat a lot of seafood as well, because that's very common in Arctic areas under ice. There's tons of fish living under ice a lot of the time. But whereas someone on the equator, would observe that there's all this wild bananas, for example, so they can eat that. And if we're, again, connected, we're not wearing too much clothing, we're not living under a bunch of artificial light and these things we're talking about that can damage this whole system, then hopefully we'll do pretty well. Now, there obviously are caveats, because a lot of the listeners are going to be people who haven't, been connected their whole life. They haven't been doing these things their whole life. So for someone just being born, feed your baby, put them in a natural coupled environment with the light cycles timed properly, the proper food at the proper times of year, get them exposed to the temperature as well, and they'll probably do pretty well if they're a young baby. Now, even the thing is, some babies inherit a huge amount of mitochondrial heteroplasmy. In other words, the potential for high mitochondrial damage from their mother. So if you're a mom and you have, this is probably the case with my mom. Now, this is something that's becoming more and more common. My mom had cancer. She had 2 autoimmune diseases in her thyroid. So a lot of people have these serious issues. And yet, even though evolution is kind of probably saying, you're probably not healthy enough to pass on your genes or whatever, that might have been the case and why they needed to use in vitro fertilization. I don't exactly know the details, but that's probably one of the roots of my issues is I inherited damaged mitochondria from my mom. Now, one of the critical findings of Dr. Wallace is that all mitochondria are passed down by women only. So neither of us, Luke and I, will be able to pass on our mitochondria. I wish I could, because I'm doing all this stuff to make them good, but only women have that ability. And that's why sometimes people talk about women, having the life force of life. But
so if I'm dating with the intention of finding a long-term life partner that I want to procreate with, I should monitor their mitochondria level more so than how they look in a bikini, right?
Well, that's the interesting thing is the two are very closely correlated.
What if you want to have a baby with a woman and she's tired all the time and has no energy and stuff like that? That means her mitochondria sucks.
You might want to get her on a good protocol.
You want a super hyper woman who's kicking ass and has tons of energy, because that means her mitochondria are good, right?
Yeah, well, so it's interesting.
Or can you just meet her and then say, hey, you're screwed up. We got to fix, I'm going to control your life for about 6 months to a year and get your mitochondria working. Then we can talk about kids.
I'm definitely not a fan of controlling anyone in any, of course.
I'm joking because I've been accused, if any of my ex-girlfriends ever listen to this, I don't know why they would, because they've heard me talk enough, but I, in the past, have been the food police and shit, and making them wear orange glasses at night and stuff. By the way, listeners, if you're a guy, don't do that. Just let your girlfriend or wife be unhealthy until they get sick enough. Eventually, they'll hit a bottom, and then they'll come to you for help. Don't proselytize. Okay.
But I would say it is
irresponsible. As I proselytize my male listeners into not proselytizing.
Yeah. Well,
carry on, Matt.
It's definitely irresponsible for someone to have kids when they're not healthy and they're not doing well, because that's setting the kid up for mitochondrial defects and issues. And obviously the first tissues where this is going to have a serious impact are in the most energy consuming tissues, so the brain and the heart. And what do we have an epidemic of today? Autism. And it's just skyrocketing. And the reason why, Dr. Wallace has actually done lots of research on this. So for the people who believe that cancer and autism and these things aren't really understood, well, check out Dr. Doug Wallace, because they are. It's just that science, we're going to talk about this, takes a long time to be accepted. And it isn't in the form of just nice gradual change. It's in the form of revolutions, like overthrowing of governments. It's really like there's the paradigm that exists, and then there's these new paradigms, and the new paradigms viciously kind of fight with the old because the old just want to defend their position. It's Dr. Wallace told me to read this book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, for anyone interested in understanding why science isn't just constantly shifting, like why you learn about something, you're like, oh, everyone should know that, to understand why they don't. The Structure of Scientific Revolutions actually lays it out. And if anyone's ever heard the term paradigm before, this guy Thomas Kuhn in that book actually coined the common use of it. So anytime anyone uses that, it comes from that book.
That's
the way
funny.
that we
I
use
say
it.
that all the time.
Well, yeah.
We're going to have a paradigm shift, man.
Yeah,
That's
and
what I always tell my
that's a
coaching
term
clients.
that he coined, paradigm shift.
Wow, okay.
So it's a really good foundational book, and it'll really blow people off their socks. And it's an easy read. It's audiobook. You could audiobook it. I did that. It was fantastic. So if you have a kid and your mitochondria are damaged, you're setting the stage for them to potentially have childhood obesity because their leptin receptor and their brain's going to be damaged, potentially autism and things like this. So yeah, personally, I would not have children with someone who, clearly didn't have good mitochondrial function, because I want my kids to thrive. I want them to be successful. Now, it doesn't mean, like you can see in my case, I've reversed a lot of this stuff. I'm much healthier, fitter, I'm no longer skinny and pale. I'd say quite the opposite. So it's,
yeah, for those of you listening,
to,
you guys on Instagram Live and Facebook Live, it's pretty dark in this hotel room where we're recording, but those of you listening, you can't tell this dude is like the pillar of health. This kid's fucking ripped. You go on his site. I think on your social media, there's you're on vacation in Mexico, like shirtless. Homeboy's in shape. Trust me. Like whatever you're doing, I'm like, I'm going to follow you because
I never go to the gym and I never work out, or almost never.
Really?
So no, I sunbathe and take ice baths.
What do you do for movement?
Nature sculpts me. Well, I landscape for the summer, but I've only started doing that for the past 2 months. It was amazing to me how the prior year during my transformation, which happened while I was on this exchange program in my third year of high school, my junior year, I didn't work out almost at all. And that's something I actually tell people, is that it's probably not best to work out when your mitochondria are trashed, because you're actually setting the stage. Like didn't know it at the time when I was running constantly. I was a miler. So I ran the mile. I just distance ran, hammered myself like many miles a week. And yeah, I was really harming myself actually. So I advocate for people to improve their mitochondrial function, improve their health before going on a strenuous exercise routine. And in the meantime, while you're repairing your mitochondrial function, which probably everyone who is a human being on the planet Earth today, who doesn't live in like a tribe or in a third world country, probably has a lot of work to do on, to be honest, then I advocate, simple, easy exercise like walking and maybe swimming, things like this, but not hard running. Definitely never work out in a gym under fake light, ever, because you might think you're getting a benefit. You might be getting strong. You might be feeling good. But again, that's kind of like that credit card scenario where we're using the credit card to create a great experience up front, but we're actually draining the bank account in the long run, because we're creating, back to free radicals where we started, we're creating the wrong free radicals, or not wrong, but just altered free radicals. So yeah, if you want to go do that, you're creating altered free radicals that the science is now proving damage mitochondrial function, damage health, create more aging, deplete stem cells and everything. So you can do that. And there's no wrong or right. We're just talking in terms of what's going to improve your health and energy and what's probably not. And again, natural selection is always in play. If you decide that you're not going to take care of yourself, then, these things are going to have an impact on you. And a lot of what we see today, I would say, honestly, with people who are just super sick and super unwell, is kind of a natural process of selection. And the thing that makes me the most upset about it, though, is that I believe it's being caused by large, I guess, the powers that be, as some say, being very careless. So it's not like the individual is doing something wrong. It's that we're raising people from the ground up with schooling. We should probably get into that. With schooling, to not be able to think for themselves, to believe whatever they're being told, and to just ultimately go down this path that's laid out for them. And the path obviously isn't working. And, we look at the world, we're looking off at New York City, such a great scenery for this episode, that's just hustling and bustling. You see the cars moving and everything. Like everything looks great, but we have to keep in mind that, I'm not an alarmist of any kind. The way we're living today is radically different. And if anyone looks at the disease rates, they're just skyrocketing. And we're really, unless we change something massively as a society, we're headed in a really not good direction. So if you find that you're doing what everyone else is doing, your life isn't radically different than the masses in some way, then you're probably going in the same direction. There's a saying that I really like. It's that you can't be neutral on a moving train. So it's like, the same thing with injustices and things like that. Even with this health and lifestyle, if you're not doing something really different than what most people are doing, you're probably following that path. And we're just putting it out there because we care about people. We don't want people to suffer and have health issues and go to lengths of, for example, drug addiction or binge eating disorder and things like that. These are just some things. There's some people with severe cancer. Speaking of cancer, I've just been, a girl around the corner from me just developed brain cancer. She's a freshman in high school, like some kind of really severe cancer, and they don't know how it's going to go. They're hoping for the best, obviously, but their parents, they smoke and pretty unhealthy. And so it's just tragic. And then I was talking with a friend who was visiting from New York, who's also into this stuff. He brought his kids down because he wanted them to hang out with me. And the kid was telling me, it's a really smart kid because he's been listening to his dad. He's super into it. He's like 13 years old. It reminded me of me 5 years ago or whatever. But he was telling me like, yeah, this girl got brain cancer and that girl got breast cancer and they're all 7th grade and 12th grade. Like, what? Why is that happening?
And go back 200-300 years, or let's say go back, let's go way back 1,000 years. Almost all of the degenerative diseases that we're dying from now didn't even exist.
Yeah.
And if they did, they were, freak accidents, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really weird shit. Okay, so I love you, dude. You're like maybe one of the only guests that's more excited than I am. This is awesome. Okay, so this is going to be a 2-part episode. So we're into the second half now.
Oh,
if
yeah.
someone's listening, this would have been well into part 2. And I have no problem with that. If I really like someone on Joe Rogan, I'll sit there and watch a 3-hour YouTube video. Like, it's better than watching a movie. I'm in this hotel, dude. They have these really cool flat screen TVs, and they're like, I don't know if you saw the one in the other room. It's in the ground on a post. They're like really dope, and they're right at eye level to just lay on the couch. I literally called the front desk and was like, is it possible to move this TV, take it out of my room? Because it's blocking the view. It's annoying me.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't want to spend time doing anything really except learning and improving my life. I get entertainment. I'll watch Netflix shows here and there. I watch Narcos or some shit. I'm not opposed to having some fun and going to the movies and things, but I love this. But I just want to make sure, because I'm very nonlinear and you are in a sense too, I want to make sure that we're able to kind of keep this in a sequence. So just so I get it in summary then, because I want to put the diet piece behind us and really start going into more of the lifestyle.
Yeah.
So essentially the answer is what then?
The answer.
Yeah. Well, in terms of because there's no diet that's perfect for everyone. Is it just like, hey, eat what feels good?
Get out your pencils, everyone. Okay. Get out your notebooks. So, I almost feel bad sometimes just laying out the things that people can do, because it's the classic saying to outline what we're talking about here is, when you know better, you do better. And I should disclaim, I meant to say this in the beginning of the first podcast, but when I said that, I discovered Dr. Krus's work and I got really into it, he's my mentor. He's an amazing man. I look up to him. He's one of the greatest people I've ever known. And I can't imagine, I'll meet many greater people, but his work literally saved my life. Otherwise, I don't know where I'd be, what I'd be stressing about, worrying about, but literally everything turned around for me. So I owe the vast majority of what I know to him. So a lot of this stuff,
for those of you that don't know, Dr. Jack Kruse is a extremely wise man, and he's been on 2 episodes of the Lifestylist podcast, and I've geeked out on his stuff really hard too.
Yeah.
And I love talking to Jack because he's so kind of inherently inflammatory, which is an ironic word to use for him because his whole teaching is about anti-inflammation, but he pisses a lot of people off. He's one of those guys, like a lot of people in health. He's just too abrasive and too opinionated, and he's just too strong. But I like it because I'll be doing something and he's like, oh, you're a fucking idiot. Why? Don't do that. Whatever. I can't even think of what it is. I'm working on my computer with the blue light on or whatever. And he's just like, oh, that's great, Luke, that you're eating goji berries and shit. But your diet totally doesn't matter because your lifestyle living in Los Angeles in such an unnatural environment is trashing you. So anyway.
Yeah. Do you want to dig into that maybe? Because that might not be clear for some people.
No, we're gonna do it. But let's wrap up. Let's put a bow on the food piece. So we at least leave people with somewhere to turn, like some sort of clarity. So you're giving credit where credit's due. So Jack Kruse, cool, we got that.
Absolutely. Okay. So food. If you're going to go and you're just starting from scratch, you're eating the SAD diet. Well, what you're probably going to want to consider to do is first go and just clean out everything that you have in your house, clean out everything that you've got around, because it's probably not good stuff. You want to cut out, just like, the general rules of thumb, cutting out from the paleo diet, from the refined vegetable oils, refined sugars, and grains are generally a good place to start. Now, I'm not saying none of this, don't have any of it, because naturally you're going to have something, you're going to want to indulge yourself and have a little bit of something, but generally we want to focus on the patterns, because the patterns are the things that guide our lives, and we live in patterns. So when you get the patterns right, you're really on a good track. So get the food at your house right, and then when you go out, you go traveling, you change things up a little bit, but get the patterns right. So you want to focus on eating what's going to be growing in your natural environment. So if you live in a sunny environment, be focusing on carbohydrates. There's going to be bananas, fruits, whatever's around, fruits, vegetables, plant matter, nuts and seeds. Definitely, I would encourage people to consume high quality seafood wherever you are in the world, no matter what time of year, because that's critical for our brain development and our entire blue light based world. Most of our technology's main light component is blue, destroys the DHA content in our brain and in our eyes. So
I'm going to take some DHA, some Mitolife DHA right now.
It's fantastic.
I'll pass it over to you next time I'm talking. Feel free to take some.
And that's one thing also is, this is something I've definitely got to dig a bit more deeply into, and I'd love to share this in a future episode or something, but on my blog, I'll talk about it. But basically, I'm not so sure about regular seafood versus supplements. There's some people who claim that supplemental DHA is the way to go because it doesn't have all the mercury and dioxin and PCBs and things like that are in regular seafood sometimes. But then again, seafood as it exists is the way that we evolved to be eating this stuff. And it's the way we've been assimilating into our body. Now, that doesn't mean we can't come up with a better alternative solution, but it's pretty hard to skirt nature. So because it was so effective for me, I would encourage people to find good, clean, wild, harvested seafood and the best quality you can possibly find. You could get it for a good price if you go to a big fish market or you go to an organic market and you look for the best stuff.
Dude, down the street in Chelsea Market, there's the best seafood place. I think it's called the Lobster House or something like that. I always go there and get lobster. Dude, they have the most bomb-ass wild fish selection there. I've never seen anything like it. Dude. Well, in San Francisco, they have some markets like that, but we don't have that in LA.
Really?
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know.
Interesting.
It's trippy. Yeah, they don't really have like a bomb-ass fresh fish market like that. Well, that's readily available.
Try to find that where you can, but sometimes there's flash frozen fish at most Whole Foods and things like that.
And I want to emphasize too, you guys, you just threw the word wild in there, but how crucial is it to not eat farmed fish?
Yeah, that's pretty important, I'd say. But even, again, some people would probably not like to hear this, but there are some farm-raised fish that are sustainably raised and raised in a good way. But generally, it's much better focused on wild because it has more nutrients, it's more naturally grown. If it's being harvested sustainably, which is something to look for, then it's also, ideally, it's going to be less disruptive to the natural environment of these fish. But and that could be the topic of a whole separate podcast.
And then also, do you lend credence to the idea that the bigger the fish, the longer it's lived and the more time it's had to bioaccumulate mercury and metals and dioxins and all this shit from eating other fish that have eaten other fish that have eaten other fish?
Yeah.
It's like the higher up on the food chain a fish is, like a swordfish is a massive fish, and even tuna is a pretty big fish.
Absolutely.
Some of them. So would you say that we want to go for the smaller fish?
Yeah, if you're concerned about mercury in these things, and the biggest reason to be concerned for people is, especially if you have a low redox, which means your mitochondria don't function well, all of these detox pathways that naturally occur in our body, remember, they all require energy to function. So if our mitochondria aren't kicking so well, I'd be a bit more skeptical of those things and probably focus on the smaller fish. But if your redox is really good and your body detoxes well, therefore, then you could probably handle some of that. But I wouldn't necessarily just go and eat only tuna or only swordfish. I would definitely focus on smaller fish like salmon. And then even shellfish can be the best because they contain the highest levels of nutrients and minerals, especially raw oysters are ideal. I love shrimp. These things can be really good. Clams and mussels are great too, as far as really nutrient dense, but also pretty clean generally, depending on where you're getting them from.
Right. One thing that Jack Cruz told me that was interesting is because I was tripping on the toxins in fish and stuff, and he's like, specifically with mercury, he said, dude, most fish is super high in selenium, And selenium is the thing that neutralizes heavy metals. So it's like fish are almost built-in anti-metal machines.
Yeah, there's tons of studies on that. So, because, you've got to imagine mercury would probably harm fish as well. So, I mean, they might accumulate it. We all, we're talking about fish accumulating mercury. I mean, think about all the crap that we're accumulating in our bodies. If that's such an issue, we should probably be more focused on all the crap we're exposing ourselves to as well, just through our natural environment. Nonetheless, there is that antidote. And that's one cool thing about the paleo guys is that they have, they're really deep into that mineral stuff. So there's plenty of content out there on that.
Okay,
note.
so try to eat seasonally, eat based on, I guess, this is a kind of a thing that I see like in health food stores now is like local, like eat local.
Yeah.
And I thought about that just from the standpoint of like, it's less burden on the environment due to the transportation and the downside of transportation from flying things and putting things on ships and cargo crates and trucks. And if you're getting local food, then there's just less, waste involved. But I didn't think about if it's local, it has to be in season, which is kind of cool too. So if people don't even know what's in season in their natural environment or where they are based on the equator, if you really look for food that's local, it's inherently going to be seasonal, right?
Yeah. And so that's the thing is if you go to the Whole Foods and you notice in the winter, say you live anywhere north of, Texas or, Florida, Georgia. I mean, just about anywhere north of there, it's probably not going to be able to grow a lot of produce in the winter because there's not enough sunlight to support it. So all of those places, Native Americans would probably be naturally ketotic. And so in the winter, we talked about a little bit what you'd be eating on the equator, but in the winter, theoretically, in the natural environment, what would you be able to find that's not plant life? Well, it must be animal life probably, or, seaweed that will grow in freezing climates. So seaweed as a plant, and then fish would be a common source of food because it's probably definitely much easier to get if you have the right tools and everything than, hunting. It just requires a lot less energy and you get much more pack in terms of nutrient density. So that would be a great option, lots of seafood. And then there's obviously fats, animal fats and things like that. And there's all this debate again, like, should I eat meat or not? Well, if you're a vegetarian, I mean, vegetarians literally couldn't exist in nature except by the equator because there wouldn't be any food. You'd die. So just think about that. I mean, just because humans can think it and it's disconnected from nature doesn't mean it's wrong. But if we use logic and we critically examine that, it should at least raise our eyebrows a bit when we think about that.
All right, health fanatics, I got a new discovery for you. You guys know that I'm always searching for the latest and greatest when it comes to superfoods and supplements and herbs, right? Well, my latest discovery is not disappointing. It's called Athletic Greens, and you can go to athleticgreens.com/Luke to check it out for yourself. So this is more than just another greens product. There's a lot of those on the market. Some of them are great. This is really a complete whole food supplement. It's got 75 ingredients in it. It's been developed over 10 years by doctors, nutritionists, naturopaths. One scoop is actually having like 11 supplements in one. So if you're someone that doesn't want to take a bunch of pills and things like that, you put a scoop of this in any smoothie, water, whatever. It's got a really great flavor. It's actually delicious. It sort of has this vanilla meets berry kind of flavor, but it's subtle enough that it easily mixes into just about any kind of smoothie or drink you're going to mix. So it's super convenient, super potent. And what's rad for you is you get 20 free travel packs valued at $99 with your first purchase. So here's where you go. Go to athleticgreens.com/Luke. That's athleticgreens.com/Luke to claim your special offer right now.
So in terms of just applicable stuff, I actually kind of have a list that I wrote out for someone I was doing a coaching session with.
Perfect.
So, he was asking, I live all the way up in Norway. What am I going to do in the winter when there's so little sun here? Plenty of fake light. People are still out, working like full-time jobs, even though there's only 3 hours of sunlight. So the things that I wrote down are pretty simple. One, exposing yourself to cold. So again, naturally, if we're living in a coupled environment, remember we're talking about kids being coupled to their environment. If you have a young child, we'd be exposed to the cold. Now, obviously, we're not living in teepees now. We're not going to be outside all the time, but using, for example, cold water to enhance the effect. Cold water transfers heat 26 times faster than air. So you could get in a cold bath for a minute and have the benefit of potentially 20 minutes of being outdoors in the cold air. So cold water can be great. This is
where we almost took a left turn earlier, moving into the environmental stuff. So I feel confident that we've kind of sewn up the food bit. I mean, we've given enough value there. I think there's enough direction. Each person kind of has enough information to figure that out.
For sure.
So cold exposure, which we're experiencing right now in this room. I don't know if you noticed it. I turned it up to 68. And I'm very tolerant to cold. I'm still freezing, but it's good because
I actually am not for some reason.
you're not. I mean, it's it's 9:40. It's getting a little late, so it's good because it's keeping me very alert. There's no way I could start getting drowsy. So okay, so cold exposure, and so you're of the belief that doing even a cold bath, or if we can work up to an ice bath, and I only take cold showers. I mean, unless I'm like I have a day where I have a lot of time, then I'll do like hot and cold. Or if my back's sore or something like that, I'll run some hot water on my neck or my back. But this morning, all cold shower in New York City. Awesome. Pretty damn cold.
Yeah, it's pretty cold now.
But you're saying that that's more effective, and if you don't like cold, to get in cold water, it's so much more powerful that you can do it for a shorter period of time.
Yeah.
Instead of like running around Manhattan naked in January for 10 minutes, you just get in an ice bath for 1 minute, essentially.
Yeah, I mean,
which is a case for ice baths over cryo.
Yeah. Oh, cryo is a whole different story. I've actually
cryotherapy is what I'm
cryotherapy.
To,
I've actually heard of cases where that could potentially be damaging to the skin because it's so cold. It's like hundreds of degrees below zero for temporary periods, but it can actually damage skin, even subtly. But we don't want to be doing that because the skin is the main, besides our eye, it's the main photoreceptor in our body to be getting light, which is critical for mitochondrial function. We haven't even dug too deep into light yet.
This is going to be a 3-hour episode. This is great. All right.
But so cold is critical. That basically, I mean, you just think about it on a fundamental level. We would be exposed to cold if we didn't have heating in buildings, basically. That's part of that coupled cycle. Just like the light cycles, that's also temperature is related to that. This is why
Daniel Vitalis, he calls the modern man that's domesticated, he calls it homo fragilis.
Homo fragilis,
because we're so susceptible to dysfunction and disease, largely because obviously of food and all that, because we're eating domesticated weird food that's not actually food. But environmentally, most of the time, if we have the money, and maybe not in places where people can't afford to control their interior environment, but we all live at basically 68, 70 degrees. And in nature, that would never happen.
Yeah.
If you live by the equator, it's going to be hella hotter than that all the time and then fluctuate a bit. If you live anywhere else, like where we are right now, it's brutally hot and humid here in the summer and then freezing. So you have like these seasonal flux that I feel builds resilience. Now, I do that with ice baths and infrared sauna. I make a fake environment that mimics living in a gnarly natural environment.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So carry on with the cold. Let's go with that.
So cold can have all kinds of...
You were saying this is one of the first things you did to turn your health around.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, so in regards to the Homo fragilis, I personally prefer Homo sapiens domesticus because it's like domesticated, and it's so perfect because literally, like, we are the humans that live in homes. Humans before homes were wild, so you have, I don't know the Latin
Have you ever
term
listened to
for
Daniel's
wild.
podcast?
I think I have.
Rewild?
A few
it's
episodes.
Called Rewild Yourself? Oh, dude, you'd love it. It's fantastic. It's been in my top 5 podcasts for however long it's been.
I definitely listened to a few, but I'll go back and check it out
he's
more.
Great, man.
So cold's huge. And this all goes back to mitochondria, see, because they're so foundational. The reason we adapt to different environments, the way we're adapting, it's really through mitochondria. Like our genes, our nuclear genome, which is where our genes are for skin color, eye color, and all that stuff, it changes for sure. Like, people became white as we move north to absorb more sunlight. But that takes a bit longer, quite a bit longer. Whereas change in the mitochondria, because there's literally, for every one human cell, there's thousands of mitochondrial cells within us. They just evolve and adapt so much more quickly given the increased rate of mutations just from the sheer numbers. So actually, humans are able to adapt based on mitochondrial changes in mitochondrial DNA, not necessarily in nuclear DNA. So for example, Dr. Wallace talks about how humans migrated to, for example, places with high oxygen levels, like the tops of mountains. Mitochondria use oxygen. They have less oxygen. They're going to have to figure out how to become more efficient with lower amounts of oxygen for these organisms to maintain their complex functions. Sure enough, they did. Same thing when you go to higher latitudes, so where there's less sunlight for a portion of the year. Dr. Wallace talks about this. When you're on the equator, your mitochondria need to be what's called tightly coupled. Now, this is a different use of the word coupled. It means that the energy production is very, very efficient. So imagine you have a ball rolling on a track, just like a little marble, and it's on some kind of track that a child built. Is the marble going to roll, or say a lot of marbles, are they going to roll more efficiently if the pieces of the track were really spaced out, or if the pieces of the track are all nice and tight? obviously nice and tight is going to be when they roll more efficiently. And think of those marbles as electrons and basically energy, and those tracks as the proteins in mitochondria. That's what the electron chain transport is in mitochondria, where we make all of our energy. So those are the cylinders of the engine, basically. So when we're in the equator, there's things like lions and tigers that we have to run from. So we need to be extremely efficient so we can run really fast and be very effective at that kind of stuff. And so, for example, you have like these marathoners. Dr. Cruz has brought up this example recently. It's very applicable. You have these people from Kenya who win marathons everywhere in the world because their mitochondria are so tightly coupled. They're so efficient. For each amount of food they eat, they make so much more energy than, for example, someone who lives in a colder climate. And the reason why is because as we move to a colder climate, Dr. Wallace has explained this in his videos. I highly recommend people check them out if this interests you at all. But basically, we're not going to die from a tiger or a lion chasing us to death. These are basically his exact words. But we are going to die of freezing to death. So we need to figure out how to, instead of using that energy to sprint quickly or to be efficient, in order to be really inefficient, which means we're releasing a lot of heat. So this is something about me. I get so hot and so heated now since doing all this mitochondrial stuff.
Me too,
because,
dude.
yeah, I mean, but we're designed to get like that because we're Northern Europeans. We're designed to be making a lot of heat in that certain time of year. And so, we're really loosely coupled. So it means our mitochondria are by definition less efficient, but that can keep us alive in cold climates. Now, the interesting thing is now that I'm in hotter climates, like, for example, Pennsylvania, quite a bit further south than Northern Ireland or Ireland. If you look at the latitude lines, Pennsylvania is actually equal with Barcelona, Spain, but it's just that the Gulf Stream heats up Europe so much. So then Ireland, even though it's equal with Alaska in latitude, doesn't get snow because of that Gulf Stream.
Interesting.
The ocean
That's
currents.
interesting. Yeah.
So they have so much less light up there compared to what we do down here in New York or Philadelphia. I mean, then again, we have more clouds though because we don't have the Gulf Stream depending on the season. But so the point is that in the summer here in Pennsylvania, it's way more sun and heat than I'd ever be experiencing if I were living where my ancestors lived in Ireland. So, I get really hot, and I think that's probably why. And so I use ice baths, even in the summer, to kind of, I guess, try to reconnect to that more natural force of my environment, and it makes me feel so good. It's come to the point where I feel so good taking ice baths where if I'm not taking them, I notice I'm significantly worse off. So cold is really important. That's mitochondria. As we moved, they adapted to just like to function with less oxygen to become less efficient and release more heat. So that basically explains the cold factor, I'd say, pretty well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm on board with it, and people think I'm nuts. Like, why do you do that? I'm like, dude, look at the amount of energy I have. If you follow me on Instagram, like, this is my real life. I'm nonstop. I take naps, I meditate, I rest. I mean, I go hardcore on restorative practices too. But when I go. And there's when I don't get ice baths or cryo, I do a different kind of cryo. It's only 160. It's cooled air instead of liquid nitrogen at Next Health in LA, Crescent Heights and Sunset. Place is amazing. So if I go without that, I freak out. Like I'm like addicted to getting cold. That's why I do cold showers every morning. I mean, dude, to wake up and think about taking a hot shower and then starting my day, I'm like, where would you get the energy? Like, I want to go back to bed.
So that's the cool thing is the cold, it stimulates these cold receptors to tell and then our fat, it stimulates our brain to tell our fat to start ramping up mitochondrial energy production. And this is the cool thing. Another thing Dr. Wallace explained to me in this just like 1.5 hour conversation we had, asked, why does cold make me feel so good? And there's a lot of scientific steps that I'm not going to get into, but basically when we get in the cold, it activates these things in our mitochondria called uncoupling proteins, which makes them inefficient. So in the mitochondria, the way they generate energy basically is they pump protons, which are these positively charged subatomic particles, and it condenses protons in this central area in the mitochondria. And basically, it uses this gradient between the inside of that area and the outside on the other side of the membrane to spin something called the ATPase and make ATP. That's a pretty simple explanation. But basically, the uncoupling protein kind of pokes a hole in that chain. And so the protons just start freely flowing through. And it's basically the mitochondria kind of starts freaking out like, oh my gosh, like this energy production is just stopping. We need to ramp it up, ramp it up, ramp it up. So imagine like you're trying to water your garden and then someone pokes a huge hole in the hose at the beginning of the hose. Like you're going to have to turn up the faucet so much to get enough water for your plants. But so it's like a trick in the mitochondria in a way, and it causes a massive increase in energy production. And obviously with that, because we're uncoupled, a lot of that is released as heat. So that's how ice baths work. You're not going to die because you have this ability. And the cool thing is that even people who are African or of African descent, who have black skin, their mitochondria as a human has been optimized to an equatorial region. But the cool thing is that these pathways for fat burning and cold don't go back 2.5 million years to humans. They go back 65 million years ago to the ancestor of all mammals. So even mammals that have moved to equatorial regions all descend from a mammal ancestor from 65 million years ago. And this is stuff that Dr. Jack Kruse has actually laid out a ton on his blog. And I encourage anyone who's interested in this to go check out the cold thermogenesis protocol and all this stuff, the cold thermogenesis series, cold thermogenesis 6 blog called The Ancient Pathway. It's nuts how cool it is. But basically, this asteroid hit the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, caused all the dinosaurs to go extinct because they didn't have high enough mitochondrial capacity to handle this lack of sunlight for so long. But the mammal ancestor that hibernated underground for 6 months of the year did, because it did that. It hibernated for that long. So it has massive mitochondrial capacity. So even though there wasn't sunlight, it could burn its own fat in presence of the cold to keep itself warm, which is like so
Holy
cool.
shit,
But so that's
crazy.
where all of so every mammal could still do this. If you put a giraffe in freezing water, it could die, probably would, but over a few generations or even within one generation, it could probably, redevelop this adaptation. Now, a giraffe probably freak the hell out and run away from freezing cold water, but it might not die as quickly as if it didn't have this ability from these ancient genes to burn this fat. So we all have this. Anyone can use it, and it's going to provide a 65 million year old kind of benefit that we got a long time ago, even if we've since moved to the equator.
Interesting.
So
That's
really
cool. And in my own subjective experience, I built up to being able to do that, where I can go sit in a 35-degree ice bath for 20 minutes, and I'm just
35 degrees.
I'm just chilling.
Wow.
Like,
yeah, literally chilling.
When I first get in, I'm like,
yeah.
I got to take a few deep breaths. It's uncomfortable. It's a little painful. And then I hit this parasympathetic state where I just surrender. I mean, to me, it's like a spiritual practice too. It's a whole other conversation. But you want to talk about like focus?
Yeah.
Dude, when you have to focus on not dying because your nervous system tells you are, that's focus.
Yeah.
And you get in an ice bath. I talked to Jack about it. He's like, dude, you're retarded. Why are you getting in there for 20 minutes? You're going to get the same effects for 3 minutes when the water's that cold. And the water doesn't need to be that cold. You're torturing yourself for no reason. I just enjoy being hardcore, you know, and seeing what I can like get away with. It's my own little challenge.
Yeah.
But anyway, the thing that I really get out of it, maybe is a selling point for people, is like, dude, you could be in the middle of a divorce, someone dying, you have to have surgery. Like, imagine the worst thing that's making you panic and freak out and giving you like the highest anxiety you've ever had in your life. If you get in an ice bath, you will calm the fuck down real quick. After you get over the hyperventilating and a little freak out panic attack from the ice, there's something about it that is so calming and takes you to this is the Wim Hof thing. This is like, to Wim Hof, it's that he always says the cold is his teacher, and I was like, what's this weirdo talking about? He spent too much time in Amsterdam at the hash bars. He's tripping. And then I started doing that protocol I first learned from Jack, and then doing kind of the Wim Hof version of it, and then just finding my own way to do it. And he's fucking right, dude. It's like there is this grounded, stable place of this universal stillness that you find in the cold after you reach the point where you can surrender to it.
Yeah.
Which could take months. I don't know, maybe take years. For me, it happens in the matter of maybe the first 30 seconds to a minute that I'm in there.
Yeah.
Because I'm really uncomfortable. And then I sort of use my consciousness and my will to calm down and relax. I sort of tell that animal reptilian self, it's okay, take it easy, you're not going to die. You don't have to hyperventilate. I use this like badass shamanistic sort of stillness and deep breathing, and I surrender to it. And my anxiety and my fears and all that shit it's not completely like they go away, but they shrink down to their realistic size.
Yeah.
It's absolutely not like the divorce, the breakup's not, because I've done this shit in a breakup to test it out. It's not like the problem goes away or you're like running from the pain. It just gives you this resilience.
Yeah.
So the rest of the day after an ice bath, I'm like, oh, parking ticket? Child's play.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like, whatever. Oh, the IRS letter comes and I'm like, my heart beats to open that letter. What does it say? Are they going to take all my money? It's like, I'm okay. It's just like, that's one of those things.
Yeah,
it's
it
just
boosts
awesome.
your dopamine level a lot, which allows us to...
Oh, is that what's happening?
Yeah, it's part of it.
No wonder I like it, dude. Because my
for
whole
sure, dude.
youth was spent chasing dopamine. All right, so we've covered some good stuff, Matt, with the cold. I think there's definitely a solid argument there as to why, even though it's uncomfortable for some of us, that it's definitely worth adopting into your lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I love the dopamine piece because I really didn't know that. So what's next on your list in terms of hacking our environment?
Yeah, well, this is just keep in mind for just the winter environment for people which is kind of the big one, because it's easy to go out in the sun when it's nice and hot. It's like, oh, it's warm out. But the real problem is that, half the world lives, or all of Europe and North America are in these zones where it gets cold. And so people don't want to go outside. They don't want to go in the sun. So going out and exposing yourself to cold. Now, you don't have to make yourself suffer. You can do what's comfortable. And, no one has to do this, but just know that there's a tremendous benefit to this conditioning, and it's going to be way greater than the time you're investing in your diet, probably way greater than definitely than the time you're putting in at the gym, because it's going to have a cumulative benefit rather than a long-term negative effect. So the next thing, when I was last in New York, when I first met Luke, actually, there was a guy named Taro who came by, founder of a company called Sigmatic. They make these awesome mushroom teas and all this kind of cool superfood type stuff. But I asked him, what do people in Finland? He's from Finland, a 13th generation. He's been on the show
a couple times too.
Oh yeah, so he's a 13th generation Finnish mushroom farmer, he told me. And I asked him, what do you guys do up there all the way up at those latitudes in the winter to stay like happy and high dopamine and everything given all the winter? And it was a simple answer: fucking and fishing. And actually, it holds the keys to all of the questions, basically. So cold was one, but then darkness is huge, and sex too is part of darkness, because people ask, what do you do in the darkness? Well, you can have sex. It's a great thing for health. There's articles coming out every day on the benefits of having sex a lot and just all the benefits of that. But darkness is important. People think of darkness as the absence of light, but I've started to think of darkness more as something that I try to get more of, because it's something that we're so devoid of in our world with artificial lighting and everything. And, we put on these nice blue blockers that Luke and I have on, but even these don't block out the light itself. And so darkness is actually really restorative. It can really boost melatonin levels far more than even just having blue blockers on. It can be really beneficial.
I wonder if doing float tanks boosts your melatonin. Because you want to talk about dark, dude. You go in a sensory deprivation chamber, that shit is dark, dark, dark. You literally can, in a good one, you can open your eyes and it looks exactly the same as when your eyes are closed. That's how dark it is.
That's amazing.
There's literally zero light.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's incredible.
So I wonder about the, the whole potential effect of that as circadian disruption if we're doing it during the daytime. But I would imagine that, as long as someone's not doing it for long periods of time every day, the benefits probably, outweighing the potential slight disruption. But
and I think the easiest thing, for the takeaway here for people, definitely the easiest one to adopt, it's like if you had to choose between getting laid and taking an ice bath, I think we just sold the audience on the sex.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the easiest sell.
Absolutely.
But I think because of our cultural conditioning, coming from some of the religions and things like that, and, obviously I think one can have sex in ways that is deleterious to their health because it's not emotionally healthy, right?
Yeah.
Because you're doing it with the wrong people at the wrong time, or it's inappropriate for whatever reason. But in the context of a culturally and emotionally healthy environment or interaction, I agree. Sex is like the best fucking medicine ever. How many times you ever had a fight with a girlfriend and you guys are going to kill each other, and then you have makeup sex and you're fucking more in love than you ever were? It can be very, seriously, it can be very healing. It can be very, very healing.
Definitely. Keep in mind, I'm pretty young. I've been in a lot fewer relationships than you have.
Yeah, that's true.
But
that's
still.
True. I do have a wreckage of bodies behind me. It's true. But on a serious note, there's one thing about sex. I want to see what your take is, or if you've read anything about this, if you haven't ejaculated that much yourself in that many people yet, is that as you get older, and you definitely would not have experienced this at 18, because I was firing them off like a fucking machine gun with no problem at 18. But as you get older, men, this is my own experience, but also other men as they start to get over maybe, 35 or so, is if you bust too much, you actually end up getting super fatigued and tired and kind of actually like almost sometimes irritable, a little grumpy, just like, you lose dopamine and you lose oxytocin from the orgasm, not the sexual act itself, but from the actual ejaculation. Have you heard anything about
Actually,
that?
man, it's funny you
But
brought this up
it
because
kind of like disrupts your hormones.
I was reading about it this morning. It's
Oh,
such
wow.
a coincidence, but yeah, it was something that's interesting me. The potential benefits of actually building up that energy, and there's actually when I started looking into it, there's actually almost every ancient culture, so many different ancient cultures have had some kind of practice of holding in that male sexual energy
Right.
and using it to become a better man. Because there's the whole now it's just in kind of an epidemic of just pornography and people just getting that quick pleasure. But actually, the benefits, at least from what these cultures have found, of holding in that sexual energy and building up and breathing it and expanding that energy throughout the body up to higher level chakras instead of like our lower level kind of sex organs, can be really, really restorative. And it can actually, these articles that I was reading this morning were talking about how this can just completely put us in super drive. I mean, if you, for example, don't ejaculate for weeks or a few days even, you can be at a much higher level than if you did. So it's a really interesting concept to me.
It's an interesting dichotomy because the oxytocin release of the act of, let's call it making love, like not just, banging someone on a night, drinking or something in the back of a club, but like someone that you really care about, another human that you really love, there is that medicinal just healing power to it. But then also it's like any good thing, too much is maybe not so great, And what's interesting, dude, you mentioned the word transmutation. Something transmutes into another thing, like the law of alchemy, universal law of alchemy. And for a number of different reasons, which we don't have time to go into, and some of them might not be appropriate to share on the show, I've elected to be celibate for at least 6 months, and I'm 3 months into that period right now. And it took a little getting used to because it's the first time since 1986 that I've been celibate this long. Like, I don't think,
wow.
I mean, that's when I lost my virginity is 1986, what I'm saying. From 16 years old to 46. I mean, I don't think I've ever gone even a month, let alone 3 months. I haven't tracked it, but it's highly unlikely. And it's at times a little weird, I'll be honest, because I'm not flirting or dating or anything at all.
Wow.
And definitely no pornography. That's like absolute fucking like that's like drinking cyanide, like just not interested in that at all for a number of different reasons. But I'm just really going inside and working on myself. And I really want to work on my career and my coaching program and this podcast and stuff. But what I'm going to tell you is the transmutation of energy, because I'm doing ice baths, I'm doing DHA, I'm doing the magnesium bicarbonate, I'm doing the fucking hydrogen that we just did before. I'm doing stuff that just rocks your mitochondria, the red light therapy, the saunas. I'm doing every single thing you can do and eat to build mitochondria, to build cellular energy, ATP, all that we've been talking about, but I'm not letting it out of my body. And so what's happening is I'm in New York recording 3 podcasts a day. We're going 2 hours doing a podcast right now. I mean, I am literally a machine, dude, of product. I can't stop.
Awesome.
I can't stop producing. And I swear to God, it's like I'm 46. I've never been this productive and like just creative in my life.
Yeah, definitely.
It's amazing. And there's definitely a correlation, not just the sexual part, but also just not putting energy into the chase.
Yeah.
I'm not on social media. I'm not on dating apps. I'm not like even getting the intrigue of like meeting someone and thinking about if they like me and starting to text them and, all the stuff that happens when you are dating and looking for a mate or a number of mates or whatever. Like all that's just off the table. And I'm seeing my personal energy just like off the charts, dude. I'm just hyped. Like
that's awesome.
Cannot stop podcasting and making my videos and social media and all the stuff that I'm doing. Like I'm doing all these speaking events and just all this shit. It's crazy, dude. I have like 4 speaking events. I'm going to Aspen. I come back to LA. I'm just on fire, and it feels so good just to my, my self-esteem and self-worth to be accomplishing so much. Maybe it's kind of maybe a male thing. I think what's happening is my testosterone is probably just skyrocketing. Because when you're in a male body and you accomplish things, it raises your testosterone. I've learned a lot about hormones from interviewing John Gray on my show a couple times. And he's like, yeah, when a male succeeds at anything, skyrockets testosterone.
Yeah.
And here, you want to
Definitely.
hear something trippy, bro? Totally, we're digressing here, audience.
No,
Just
it's
stay with
awesome.
us.
It's
Want to
awesome.
hear something weird when we're talking about, semen retention and stuff? This is one of the most fascinating things I've learned by hosting this show, which is just one of the many benefits. I get to interview brilliant people like you. John Gray told me that one of the reasons that pornography is so damaging to men is because when you ejaculate from a artificial stimuli, such as pornography, you lose all of your testosterone and you get this huge rush of dopamine. That's why it feels so good. Just like social media and any kind of like gratification is a dopamine surge, right? But when you're making love with another person, it's balanced out by oxytocin. So when you're hugging and loving and kissing and all of this stuff, your testosterone's going through the roof, your dopamine's going through the roof, but dopamine and oxytocin balance each other out.
Wow.
And there's this synergy between the two. And when you're only having sex with your hand, or however you do it as a human being, I don't know if this is true. I don't really study this stuff for women because I'm not in a woman's body this time around. I'm, dealing with the male apparatus.
Yeah.
But when you're having sex with yourself, like Billy Idol style, dancing with yourself, you blow all of your dopamine, but it's not tempered by any oxytocin.
That's so interesting.
And that's why you get depressed. And that's why people get addicted to pornography and just, sleeping with sex workers and all of that sort of the dark shadow side of male sexuality. Not that it's morally wrong. I don't mean shadow like that, but, the side of it that tends to have negative effects on one's life and in society in general, in some cases. That explains the whole fucking thing. Isn't that weird?
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, because oxytocin is like, that's the feel-good love molecule, man. I mean, that's what you get when you hug someone or when a puppy walks in the room, you get a surge of oxytocin. It's like literally the best feeling there is in the world. It's the feeling of love. And so, I found that was so fascinating. I was like, oh my God, that totally explains it. And then what happens is, because you were talking about artificially supplementing melatonin and how that can be bad, because then your body's like, oh, cool, I don't need to make that anymore. The same thing happens when you do things that flood you with dopamine and it's not tempered with oxytocin.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting.
Then you kind of get depressed. And then what do? You go back to the dopamine-producing behavior.
I've been wondering about this actually recently a lot.
It's so trippy. That
cool.
just made perfect sense because I'm like, to be honest, dude, like I can go have sex with someone that I'm not in a relationship with and we don't care about each other at all. And as long as I'm not in any way being disrespectful or mistreating them and everything's on the up and up and they're on board and everything's like out in the open and we're, what I'm saying? It's not like manipulative or anything like that or, seductive or trippy. As long as it's good spiritual energy and everything's open, I'm fine with it physically and in terms of my mood. Now, it's not where I want to, it's just not where I am in my life right now. I have no interest in doing that because I'm just kind of over it. I want something more meaningful. But if I do something artificially stimulating, I'm wrecked.
Yeah.
It's just totally like, it makes me so bummed out.
That's so
it's
interesting.
so not worth even going there because it's so depressing. And I think that's the missing link. So
so interesting.
Gentlemen, you dogs, you horn dogs listening, there's a lot to be said for that. But back to your point of what a wonderfully healing thing healthy sexuality is for people.
Absolutely.
So for people on the other end of the spectrum that are maybe repressing sex because they feel it's morally wrong or, whatever. I'm doing it for a totally weird reason. That's just my own thing right now, just to kind of rebuild and really look at the way I approach it and do it in a way that is in alignment with where I am in my life. But sex is like maybe a superfood in a sense, All right, so what's next?
So we have cold, we have darkness and sex. Then in the winter, we have seafood and fat. We already went deep into that, so that speaks for itself. Getting seafood and fat because they're the seasonal foods in a cold climate.
Yeah.
And then the fourth one that can be really powerful is actually sauna or fire. And so Luke kind of talked about those briefly, but basically those provide our body with infrared light. The cool thing about infrared light is that because of the way it interacts with water, it's one of the few frequencies of light that our body has not developed skin to block from. In other words, if you look, there's a picture you could probably find of the penetration of different wavelengths of light into skin. Some like UV doesn't even go down in a nanometer. It barely goes into the skin, but infrared goes down as deep as 30 centimeters. In other words, all the way through the body, it can potentially go. So infrared light interacts with water in really interesting ways to create structured water. That's how structured fourth phase of water is created. So just
right,
so people know, the
right.
water in our cells, and Dr. Cruz talked about this in his episode, I believe, but the water in our cells is very different from water in a glass like I have in front of me. It's in a fourth phase structured type of liquid crystalline lattice. Basically, it's charge separated, which means the water is no longer H2O actually in our cells. It's H3O2. Basically, two water molecules, two of them both drop off one of their hydrogen molecules and they bond and they create it. Like once the crystal is all formed between these OH minus particles, it makes a whole crystal type thing. And that is H3O2 by its molecular structure. There's a book, The Fourth Phase of Water by Gerald Pollack. Anyone who wants to learn more about that, read it and you'll get it all. But the point of that is that he found that infrared light is what structures this water. Interestingly enough, the vents at the bottom of the ocean where life is thought to first have begun are just pouring out massive amounts of infrared light around a ton of water with all these minerals and stuff and amino acids that are naturally produced down there. So it's a very, very convincing theory of the origin of life. That is one of the reasons why infrared light can be so good. So fires, just so people know, anytime you feel heat, that's infrared light. So fires, saunas are both really great examples of that. And we basically absorb this infrared light. It has these awesome impacts on our mitochondria. There's actually studies that show that we can make ATP without any food input just through the use of infrared light because of the way that it interacts with mitochondria and the water around them. And so this also acts to charge up, quote unquote, the water battery in our cells. So in other words, this is a whole separate issue. It could go really deep, but in simple terms, there's some researchers who have proven very definitively, one guy especially named Gilbert Ling, that all living organisms are based on energy from light that is stored in water. And this interacts with proteins. ATP, in other words, isn't the energy substrate of life, as standard scientific theories believe. This is what Gilbert Ling has proven. And Dr. Cruz also has gone very deep into this work on his blog. But basically, ATP just serves to unwind proteins so that water molecules in this structured phase can bind to the proteins and then do something that's called protonicity. So electricity with electrons, but it's actually electricity but with protons, because the protons, remember, have been kind of excluded, so kept out of this fourth phase of water. So it's like the fourth phase touches the proteins and the proteins become hydrated by the water. And then there's this movement of energy flow through the protons, through the positively charged particles in a life form. Gilbert Ling has written books. One's called What is Life Answered? One's called Life at the Cell and Below Cell Level. And that's very deep for people who are scientific and want to learn about that stuff. Dr. Cruz's blog dissects it very well. I'm going to be writing more about that. But the whole point is that our bodies, our whole life is based on light energy stored in water. And food, like we talked about, is an addition to become more complex on top of that. But what we've done is because we only perceive as humans, we perceive that eating food gives us energy, but because it was taken for granted, it was always a given being out in the sunlight, even if we have clothes on. One of the main ways that sunlight can charge the water battery in our body, which a large part of that is our blood, is through the eye. So the eye is a perfect photoreceptor. Light goes into our eye. And there's some studies by a guy named Dan Oren at Yale that show that something like 60% of all of the volume of blood in our entire body passes behind our eyes in something like 40 minutes. Or it's just an absurd amount of blood is just passing in the pathways of vessels behind our eye. So it kind of is a groundwork to show that the eye can be like the wireless charging port, if you will. So, there's these wireless iPhone chargers coming out where you don't have to actually touch it to the phone. It charges that battery. That's the same thing the sun does to us, to our water.
Can you imagine the EMF that's going to come off those
terrible.
fucking
The new
things,
iPhone
dude?
X. Yeah.
Oh,
It's all EMF, obviously. So that's how it works. But
anyway, okay,
yeah.
So through the eye also, we're able to capture energy.
Yeah,
okay,
basically sunlight energy. And that charges, basically structures this water. So we have what's called a higher redox potential in our cells because this water battery, because again, when you have positive charge and negative charge separated, that's basically a battery. And in this book, The Fourth Phase of Water, they literally created this fourth phase of water, put two microelectrodes, one in the negatively charged crystalline part and one in the positively charged part, and they actually got a current of energy enough to turn on a small light bulb, which is fantastic. So Gilbert Ling was kind of looking for that missing link from Pollack, and I think Gilbert Ling's like 97 or something, but I think their work's going to work together really well to show that light and water are super foundational to life. And food, obviously, we need food, but if we keep eating food and cut out that basic energy source of light, then we're going to have some serious problems. Dr. Kruse has kind of explained it by saying that we're designed to get 2/3 of our energy from light and 1/3 from food, but we're literally just cutting out the light part entirely, or at least we're replacing it with toxic lights that don't provide the full spectrum of energy, that destroy our melatonin levels, especially if used at night, and destroy mitochondrial function. So, some of my friends, this always kind of comes up. They say like, oh, if this is real, or at least at first they did. Now they're totally convinced and they don't even question it at all. They see what I'm doing. But at first they were like, if this is legit, like, why don't we see the effects? And the point that I try to make is that we don't even have an example of what an optimal human looks like. I mean, if we could see Native Americans, or if we could see, for example, mostly Native Americans, the last really.
I mean, if you look at the work
humans.
of Weston Price, he traveled around the world.
Perfect example.
He traveled around the world and studied these people in perfect health, dude. And you have these Aboriginal people living out in the wild,
perfect
and
example.
They have no cavities. Their teeth, they have these bright, straight teeth. They're physically ripped. Yeah. They have huge
all
muscles.
Comes from redox.
Yeah, dude. And it's like, these are quote unquote primitive people. These people were badasses. Yeah. If you guys, we'll put in the show notes, or even if you Google like Weston Price photos, you see these just amazing specimens of human beings that are they're just animals, dude. Yeah. They're just the fiercest, most vibrant, healthy looking people because they're living in accordance with nature.
Yeah. And so obviously the question in my mind becomes, were they healthy because they were, eating this diet that's a specific nutrient, they're focused on that ratio or something, or are they healthy because they're connected to nature? Now, it's definitely a combination, but the more foundational part is obviously seeming, based on the science, to be that they're connected to nature, they're in the full spectrum light, which allows their engines to be good, and they could probably eat just about any food and still do pretty darn well. So, so that's how infrared light, cool. It charges our battery, gives us that structured water. It basically is like free energy for our cells. So, it's obvious, like, we gravitate towards fire. It's not like humans built our entire night lives for millions of years around fires just because they looked pretty. You know what I mean? Obviously, they're warm, so they keep us alive. But, I mean, we're able to survive without the fires. In other words, like, people say, oh, they use the fires because they're warm. They help them stay alive in the cold. And sure, they do. But we obviously didn't have fires burning all the time. It's not like we need them to stay alive. So we're obviously doing it because it provides some kind of added benefit. And the question is, well, what is the added benefit? What's the mechanism there? What's going on? And clearly, again, life being something that takes energy from the external environment and uses it to prevent decay and to do all these complex functions, we do things that are boosting our dopamine level, and that's dopamine level and everything. Those are usually just kind of a middleman to indicate to our brain, oh, this thing's actually having a systemic benefit generally.
Right. It's just, unfortunately, your brain can't tell when that's refreshing your Instagram feed.
Exactly. That's an issue.
Yeah. But what's trippy about that is there's so much research on infrared saunas and how they boost your dopamine and serotonin, all these neurotransmitters, and fix your hormones and all this stuff,
Yeah.
So I think that's why I'm always just gravitating towards some of the technology that mimics nature. So, like, I don't know, I could drive to the Pacific Ocean in January and that shit's about 45 degrees. I mean, it gets cold.
Wow.
But why do that if I can just buy a freezer from Sears, fill it up with water, and turn the dial, put it on a timer so it's always at 40 degrees. And then I just go in, my brother's gym a mile away and hop in there. And then have an infrared sauna in my podcast studio at home. And I have my Juve red light panel. So it's like, I'm just intuitively doing all this stuff. I mean, I research, the science on it and stuff like that and make sure that it has some efficacy. But once I get it, I just know my body's like, yes, time for a sauna. Like, I literally miss my sauna.
Oh, yeah.
I'm here in a really great hotel room. I'm like, what's missing here is there's no amber light. So I have to wear these fucking glasses in here. And there's no sauna. And I can't get the water cold enough because it's, September.
Yeah.
So let's cover then when we're talking about light, because we're balls deeper, dude. We might as well just go for this shit. I mean, this is a mega session. And you're not only the youngest guest, this is the longest episode of Lifestyles Podcast.
I love it.
By probably about 20 minutes. So we're gonna I don't know when I'm gonna catch you next, dude. You might just
who knows,
take off into orbit if you learn anymore. This is insanity. So let's get into the sun piece a bit, because way back in the beginning, I think within my first 10 episodes, I interviewed a lovely and brilliant woman named Nadine Artemis, who owns a company called Living Libations. And she's an expert on skin and beauty because she makes natural beauty products, right? And skincare products. And that episode was called The Great Sunshine Swindle. And we talked about how we've been duped as a race, essentially, to believe that this thing called the sun is bad for you and that it's poison and it's going to kill you. When in fact, what we're saying here today is it's the very thing that produces or sustains all of life on the entire planet.
Yeah.
And yet we've been taught since, I guess, the 1950s that we have to put this cancer-causing lotion on to protect ourselves from this ball of fire in the sky that gives you cancer. So we're like putting cancer on us to not get it. And not only that, the sunscreen blocks, I always forget UVA and UVB mixed. I don't remember which one, but sunscreen essentially creates and so do windows and so do eyeglasses of all types.
Absolutely.
They filter out half of the UV. Do you remember if
UVB?
Okay. So they cut out UVB. And so what happens is you're creating a non-native, an unnatural type of sunlight, which fucks you up and gives you cancer.
Yeah, it does.
Because it kills your mitochondria.
Yeah, it's not good.
So what do we do to get healthy sun? Especially if someone is fair-skinned.
Yeah, that's
this is the argument I always get. Well,
question.
dude, I'm Irish. Like, I can't go in the sun. And then I actually fucking trained one guy back in LA. I mean, I'm going to take all the credit for it. I don't deserve it all, but I'm going to take it. But based on some of my suggestions, my friend Harrison, who's like total ginger, I mean, like orange-ass hair, covered in freckles, his whole body, very fair skin, and he followed my advice. He worked his way up little by little without burning because he knows his burn threshold. And now he's like basically like a normal guy, not a red-haired person that has to be terrified of the sun. Like, he goes out with the rest of us. And he's a little cautious. You know, he doesn't go out there for 2 hours. But dude, he has a nice base tan. He accepted the fact that he has freckles on his skin, and he's like, he loves himself and accepts himself. And that's the way God made him. And he just deals with it. So he gets more freckles when he gets sun. But he's way, way happier and way healthier because he's probably cranking up his vitamin D and all this stuff. So how can we get more sun safely?
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind when you talk about people saying that the sun, just causes cancer and the sun's bad and everything, it's like there's so many people in the medical world, the dermatology industry saying, like the two main causes of cancer are cigarette smoking and sun exposure. And yeah, cigarette smoking, that's kind of a different issue. But with sun exposure, I was trying to think of an analogy while you're talking of what is it akin to? Like an organism that is entirely fueled and existing because of the sun's light, saying that the sun's light causes cancer. The only thing I could think of is like a child saying that their mother is the cause of all of their suffering. It's like just complete nonsense. It's just so illogical. Like, imagine me literally saying, because my mom gave me birth, she is the reason that I suffer, which maybe could make some kind of sense. Not the best example, but you get the idea. It's really illogical. It doesn't really work. So basically, yeah, sunlight, laid the groundwork for photosynthesis to create all kinds of foods that are eaten and then lead to us. And yeah, so just to get straight into it, because if people have listened to Luke's podcast enough and Dr. Cruz, they understand that sun's definitely not cancer causing. But just to get a little deeper into that, I mean, more or less, does it make more sense to you, the audience, that the sun, the giver of life, the primordial force of energy that animates all matter on Earth to create this thing that we call life and our lives and our thoughts and everything, is the cause of this disease and dysfunction of our bodies? Or do you think it's more likely that maybe all of these completely uncoupled things that we've begun putting into our environment could be the cause of this uncoupled growth in our cells? And when you begin to understand the science a bit better, if you learn about Dr. Doug Wallace, he's proven pretty darn clearly that mitochondrial dysfunction is the cause of cancer, and the two are very much intertwined. But cancer is completely just uncontrolled growth. So if you think about what we're doing with artificial lighting, we're completely uncoupling these cycles that coupled again, it just means when things are yoked and synchronized together. So we're completely desynchronizing these cycles that are tightly controlled in order to regulate all of our growth and metabolism. Sunlight, darkness, and our cells are supposed to be timed that way. And now we're just saying constant sunlight, it's not even sunlight, it's just fake light. That's saying, telling our hormones on one hand and our brain, like, oh, there's as much sunlight as the equator on noontime in the middle of the summer all day long and all night long while we stare at our phones, while concurrently completely, feeding that with a ton of sugar, carbohydrates. So it's basically like kind of putting in a stimulus for just grow. It's summer, thrive, but there's no foundational kind of energy like health bank account to back up that whole process. And so that leads to uncontrolled growth, basically, constant uncontrolled growth. Like there's a book called Light in Shaping Life, if you're interested in the health effects of light and everything. And they found that cancerous cells, it's a big actually compilation of all research on light and biophotomodulation and photobiology from like 1800s, 1900s, and so on. But they found that stress cells emit a lot of ultraviolet light. So it's like our cells are literally capturing booths for ultraviolet light. And so this is where this whole theory of UV causing cancer falls apart. When a cell dies, this is something most people don't know, and most people won't know unless they go and read this book, Light in Shaping Life. But after a human dies, for 18 hours, the period between when we die and when we hit rigor mortis, when the body's cold, hard, and room temperature, the cells were found to be emitting ultraviolet light for 18 hours. So people talk about you die and your soul leaves your body. Well, what's really leaving your body is ultraviolet light for 18 hours. And you can't see it and you can't feel it as heat. It's invisible light. So literally our cells are capturing, like Dr. Cruz calls, playrooms for photons. They're literally designed to capture light energy and utilize it. So to say that, again, UV causes cancer is just so backwards and just lacking in understanding of biology. Anyone who reads Light in Shaping Life will realize that it's just completely backwards. And
it's fake news.
More or less, yeah. Completely.
I mean, well, look at where the information's coming from. You said it. The dermatology industry and the sunscreen industry.
Yeah. And studies that were done originally on nocturnal animals. So most people don't know this either, but the studies that showed that UV causes skin cancer and still for some reason are held as, the standard today, even though, when you see this in the news, you don't see any of the studies linked, because obviously if they did, the evidence would be clearly not that supportive. But they were done on nocturnal animals, so rats and mice, I think, and they had lived their lives in a lab under mostly fake light. And then the light that they were shining on them was artificial full spectrum sunlight. So the spectrum wasn't even like real sunlight. So it's like these rats that aren't even necessarily comparable to humans. I mean, animal testing does have a place for sure, but they're nocturnal and they're in the most important factor is they're in this completely toxic, non-native EMF environment. So to say that the sun is causing these animals cancer is to like be, for example, in a room smoking cigarettes, and inhaling a bunch of cigarettes and drinking, dioxin Agent Orange, and then, being under a full spectrum light and being like, it's probably a full spectrum light that caused my cancer, right? Because I can't, the other stuff didn't, right? It's just because they're unaware, science has been unaware and it hasn't controlled for the effects of artificial lights because it's only become so apparent in the last 5 years or so that they're toxic, even though the research has been done since the 60s by a guy named John Ott, who happened to be Walt Disney's personal time-lapse photographer. His book's called Health and Light. Highly recommend it. Really simple book to start understanding these concepts. But he lays it out.
These show notes for this episode are going to be bananas, dude.
They're going to be. This is such gold.
This is going to be
money for this.
This is going to be a 5-page blog post to support this. So we're still relying on that data to say the sun gives you cancer.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely. I mean,
because here's the other thing about that is those rats definitely or mice were definitely not grounded either. Because here's the thing, dude. When any natural animal in all of the history of every living fucking creature that walks the earth, with the exception of birds in flight or in migration, are always either touching the ground or a plant that they're resting on or water. So we're always grounded.
Oh, yeah.
Human beings are the first creature on the planet that have disconnected ourselves. Like right now we're on the 16th floor. Like we're hella far from the ground. Now I have some technology in my room that will make us grounded because the wires in this building go down into the ground in the dirt underneath here. It's another conversation. But when they're doing tests like that, the animal is so far removed from its natural environment. So say we sit up here in this window right here every day and we get 6 hours sun where the UVB is blocked out by the glass, blocks out the full spectrum. We're sitting in fake sun and we're not touching the ground. We're not grounded, in other words. So there's nowhere for like those positive electrons to go and they're just building up in our system. Then the sun will cause cancer because we're not using the sun as it's naturally intended.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. We can really change
in order to
everything.
do clinical testing like that, you have to recreate the natural environment. Otherwise, your test is fucking bogus.
Pretty much.
Your study is whack.
Because science, again, is like a man-made concept.
Right.
So it doesn't really work when we try to, obviously science, I don't mean to say science doesn't work because it does work, but in terms of certain things like these, it's really difficult to control for all the variables because obviously nature is so nonlinear and so complex that it's almost, some scientists might claim that it's impossible to do studies like those. But then, we can equally claim clearly that it's impossible to really know that UV is the cause there in that case when they have the fake light. And in fact, this stuff has been shown to cause, stress to cells, which causes cells to emit ultraviolet light as all stress cells do. And then cancerous cells are more ultraviolet light than any because they're the most leaky, so to speak. They can't hold light that they've captured as well. So that's just a massive problem. But still, and then there's other examples. For example, DNA fluoresces with ultraviolet light. Ultraviolet light is used in cellular communication inside of our bodies. It's doing all of these functions. And yet we're saying that it causes cancer. It's like, in fact, for thousands of years, if we want to go back, ancient peoples used ultraviolet light and sunlight as the cure for diseases and everything. And only since we've completely radically altered our environment with fake light have we begun to think that maybe ultraviolet causes cancer. But is it more likely that, again, ultraviolet causes the cancer? Or is it because, again, these people in the past were exposed to so much ultraviolet light and they weren't having such high rates of cancer? People, again, this is such a simple thing. I can't believe this didn't even come up first thing when we were talking about sunlight. Skin cancer rates are higher and higher and higher every year, and they're getting higher even though people are getting exponentially less ultraviolet light and wearing more sunscreen. Like, does it really make any sense at all that sunlight causes skin cancer? Anyone who puts credence to that theory and isn't willing to challenge that and look a bit deeper, to me, is just not someone who thinks logically. And so I'm not even going to bother trying to convince someone.
It's sort of like
that.
the record depths of ice in the Antarctic now. It's like sort of like, I don't even want to do the political aspect of global warming. I think that planets like ours probably change a lot, whether there's people on them or not. That's my basic understanding. If you look at the ice core drilling going back thousands and thousands of years before people were here, the shit was hotter many times before.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm all for not polluting Mother Earth, very much so. I don't fucking litter, you know what I mean? I don't throw a piece of gum on the ground because I love the planet. But yeah, it's interesting, in the Antarctica, they're finding now that we have more ice than we've had in like hundreds of years or something, Yeah,
it's like totally.
Yeah. So a lot of the things we believe are just memes. And unless someone like you is a super geek and is like done the research, we all kind of just go, oh yeah, that's what I said that on the news, so that's true.
Yeah. It's
just like how easily brainwashed we are, myself included, and how impressionable. I really learned this. It's funny, on the other side of the building, you can see where the Twin Towers were. We were talking about that earlier and how just strange that whole thing was. But I first discovered how susceptible I am to brainwashing on 9/11 because I saw this little YouTube video right after that had gone viral, and it was maybe 15 minutes, and it was like, the essence of it was, hey, you ever notice that there's actually no plane at the Pentagon? I was like, oh yeah, a plane crashed on 9/11. There was 3 planes. One of them went down Pennsylvania or some shit, 93 or whatever, which, by the way, there's no remnants of a plane there either. That's another conversation I found out later. But I thought, well, no, I saw it on the news when 9/11 was happening. I was glued to the TV. You saw the Twin Towers get hit and then a plane hit the Pentagon. Yeah, it did. And then this video went on to explain like, well, where's the bodies? Where are the seats? Where's the fuselage? Where are the engines? There's no plane there.
Yeah.
And there still
Completely.
isn't, because there never fucking was.
Yeah.
There's a round hole in the Pentagon, but there's no holes where the wings would have been. I mean, the whole thing completely falls apart in the face of like kindergarten level understanding of physical matter. There was no fucking plane there. Okay. I'm sorry. There just wasn't.
Yeah.
No, totally. We could have a 10-hour episode on all the inconsistencies of the official story of 9/11. Point is just that so many things that we just take at face value because our dermatologist told us or whatever, oh, that's the way it is. But are we not brainwashed to not think critically and question authority and think, well, that's what everyone says, but why don't I check it out? You know, when it comes to getting in the sun. And this is what's so wonderful about, at least for now, at this point in our culture, I'm not censored from talking about whatever I want on my own podcast. Probably will come a day when Zuckerberg like buys iTunes or something. And then if I say something that's not politically correct, I'll be shut down and have to start my own network or something. But for now, you can say whatever you want, including like, as far as I see it, the sun is really fucking good for you. What's not good for you is getting sunburnt. Okay. So let's get back to just tactical takeaway strategy now that maybe we've cracked open some people's melons.
Absolutely.
Where they actually think, oh shit, that kind of doesn't make sense what I've been taught. So how would you recommend, because sun is such a life-giving, wonderful thing, how would you recommend that someone can kind of ease their way into it without hurting themselves?
I'm going to challenge one more time even on that.
Okay.
Some stuff, I mean, I can't say for sure, but I'll say that Dr. Cruz, who, definitely has some pretty convincing evidence when he lays this out on his logs, which it's hard to just simplify, but people can go check that out for themselves. But basically, he's kind of laid out how sunburns even aren't necessarily a massive issue because, I don't know how to put this necessarily, but think about, for example, if you were to go and burn your hand on a pot, or let's just say you were a professional chef and you burn your hand on your pot like every few days or something because you're doing something really heat intensive, people probably wouldn't just start thinking, oh, you're probably going to get cancer because you've been burning your hands so much. You know, it just wouldn't come across the mind. The only reason why people think that with sunburns is because we've been told that sunburns are leading to skin cancer. You know what I mean? But if you were told, for example, that burning your hand on a pot regularly would get cancer, then you would totally associate it. But nobody does. Nobody thinks, even if you get burnt, regularly with a hot pot, people don't think you're going to get cancer where that burn is. Now, the whole concept of UV causing skin cancer is based on this concept of genetic mutation caused by ultraviolet radiation, which causes these cells to proliferate in weird fashions. But the question that is interesting is, why is it that all of these cells are getting all of these cancers, these skin cancers, and they all look the exact same? They're very, very similar cancers, very similar, almost identical the way that they're functioning. And yet, based on the theory of genetic mutation from ultraviolet, how likely is it that that ultraviolet radiation hitting these genes is mutating all the genes in precisely such a way that all of these cancers happen to be exactly identical? Like, is that really logical? Does that make any sense at all? And even talking with Dr. Wallace, he kind of laughed at this concept of, because he's focused on mitochondrial genetics, because that's where the evidence is indicating biological change really occurs in large ways over, in generations. And so he was kind of amused by this whole concept of genetic mutation leading to evolution and everything. And, he believes it's mitochondrial genetic change that ultimately drives the nuclear genetic change because of the way the two interact very closely as this symbiotic colony. But so bringing that over to the ultraviolet mutating genes and causing skin cancer, that just doesn't make any sense. The chances of that are astronomically impossible, that if ultraviolet mutates our genes and causes this kind of weird growth that happens to be the same in everyone, it makes a lot more sense that it's these same identical types of lights that we're exposing all of ourselves to, these LEDs and CFLs and things. And again, skin cancer rates have skyrocketed in people who work indoors. So it's like you work indoors 10 hours a day or 8 hours a day, you go outside in the sun for 30 minutes and you get skin cancer when you're older, and you claim, oh yeah, the sun probably gave me skin cancer, all that sun exposure, but you're working a full-time job indoors under fluorescent lights. Like, apparently there are times in the past where people actually knew that fluorescent lights could cause cancer, and they actually made recommendations like, oh, don't, you should probably cover up from that light because that could be harmful. And again, Health and Light by John Ott goes kind of deep into that. But so in terms of getting useful stuff, I was the palest person I knew just a few years ago, and now I'm probably one of the tanner people I know, especially probably the tannest Irish white person that I know for sure. And so how did I change that? Well, I started increasing cellular redox and the charge of the water in my cells, basically by doing all the things we've been saying. So it's not like there's one silver bullet, but it's basically start going outside grounded, start building up your sun exposure a few minutes a day. If your skin gets red, it doesn't mean you're burnt. It just means blood's coming to the surface as it is supposed to absorb ultraviolet radiation. And if you want to learn about that, there's a video called Why the Sun is Necessary for Optimal Health by Alexander Wunsch, a German photobiologist, on YouTube, and it will explain everything. I've learned more from that one video than probably anything I've ever listened to in my entire life, besides, of course, Luke's podcasts. But
I agree. I agree. I'm going to go with that.
But the point is that you can build up this sun exposure, and just because your skin gets red doesn't mean you're burnt. People always tell me, "Oh, you're burnt, you're burnt, you're burnt," and I say, "No, I'm not. It's just blood at the surface. That's why it looks red." And the blood comes up because it has these porphyrins and hemoglobin molecules that absorb all frequencies of ultraviolet light. So the blood's actually trying to absorb ultraviolet light. Another massive hole in the theory that ultraviolet light is the enemy and it causes cancer and everything and so on. So anyway, we can build up our exposure, eating lots of seafood, putting DHA in our skin, in our cell membranes of our skin can help to absorb and assimilate sunlight very effectively.
Dude, I just thought of something also totally like counter theory on that, is that when we get sun exposure, we produce the hormone vitamin D3, and vitamin D3 is necessary in order to produce melatonin. And melatonin is the number one anti-cancer molecule in the human body.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the fucking fake lights, I like that you call them fake lighting, because that's what it is. The fake lighting kills the melatonin, which is the thing that fights cancer the most in your body. So it's like, really, the enemy is artificial sun.
Yeah,
and it's like what we have in this room right now. I mean, thankfully, we both have our glasses, but we have
our skin's covered, which isn't ideal. Yeah,
we have photoreceptors on our skin, which is kicking it up. But it's like, see, people think I'm paranoid and crazy. Like on the airplane, I have my True Dark glasses on. People look at me like the goddamn Unabomber. It's like, I don't give a shit. Like, I think it's funny to get stared at is funny. I like freaking people out. That's why
I love it.
When I was a kid, I dyed my hair and had earrings and wore makeup and got tattoos and whatever. Just like, I want to irritate people, or at least amuse them, if not. But it's like, dude, we're living what you're referring to as fake light is this blue light from our cell phones and our computers and, the LED lights, the fluorescent lights. It's this narrow spectrum of blue light that would never exist in nature. And the reason the sun is friendly to, this is just my interpretation, I want to see what you think. The reason the sun is friendly is because not only does it have this multitude of different light spectrums, of different colors and temperatures of light, but it changes all throughout the day depending on where you are on the earth, right? So it's like you never, ever in nature would have a static single spectrum of light like you have in a very cool LED light. Like when you can feel it too, people listening. Think about when you walk into a big box store like Target or Best Buy or something. Have you ever noticed that it's irritating to your eyes to be in there?
Yeah.
And I don't believe, some people have conspiracies that like the stores do it on purpose to scramble your brain so you wander around and just keep buying shit.
Yeah.
It might be true, but I think it's probably more true that it's cheaper to run LED lights that are in the cool spectrum because it takes less energy, right?
Yeah. Less energy for your brain too. That's kind of the thing, is we subtracted energy from our lights to make them energy efficient.
Right.
And in doing so, we subtracted energy from our brains and caused cancer and diseases.
Because we need those warmer, or at least the varied spectrums of light, of color, temperature,
well, absolutely.
right?
So the thing, it's so simple. It's like all life is literally governed by the light of the sun. Basically, it's so obvious. Like, try doing something for me. Anyone who doesn't believe this, try shifting your sleep cycle so that you're awake all night long and asleep all day long, and tell me how you feel after a week. And you're going to feel like shit because your body isn't designed to do that. So it's so obvious that the sun, why is it light during the day? Why are you awake? Because the sun's up. Your body is literally timed and designed to run with the sun all the time, literally. And, when we get so disconnected, like you're saying, it's, basically we're going in these fake frequencies. Like you said, they're static. They're obviously blue is a component of sunlight, so we can see blue, but it's balanced and everything, and it does certain functions in our body, and they change throughout the day and the seasons. Whereas again, like inside, blue is just the constant color. So the functions that, blue is doing are just completely overemphasized in our biologies now. And honestly, this is almost giving me kind of a new understanding, a new way of looking at it. But whatever cancer is and all of these diseases, this is kind of what Dr. Cruz has been saying forever. And I'm just always kind of trying to understand it a little bit better because it's really tough to fully grasp. But basically, it's that, from my understanding, we are just causing the things that blue light from the sun naturally does to be done in hyperdrive constantly. And that's actually what's leading to these diseases. So if it's balanced, if it's all good, then it's not going to cause a problem. But when it's just hyperdrive all day long, it's going to cause these diseases. So for the listeners, you've gotten enough of the science. You're probably convinced. You want to know what you can do. So, it's so simple. We were talking about how to get healthy sun exposure. Again, build up. And honestly, if you read the book Health and Light, it'll make a lot of sense. The best thing you can do is spend as much time outdoors as possible. So if you have a full-time job, I get it. It's tough. Definitely try to get as much time outside as possible still. If you could consider moving so you could be somewhere with more sun to really improve your health. Say you're inside 8 hours a day and you're in New York in the winter, you're going to go outside and you're not going to have any sun really. But if you're in LA LA is not ideal because of the EMF levels out there. But if you go to somewhere like Florida, the Gulf Coast, there's a lot more sun. So say you're in your office 8 hours a day, you go outside, you still get a little bit of sun. So, things like that are, maybe not everyone could do that, but if you're really committed, then you want that health benefit of the sun that we're so deprived of, especially in this world where there's so many things stealing energy from us. It's like in order to have optimal health, we really have to go above and beyond and do things like that. And otherwise, we're just going to kind of be at a certain mediocre level. But that's a huge way to increase sun exposure is moving or just changing your lifestyle so you can get more sun. Just building in wherever you can and building up your exposure. Even just your eye is critical. Never wear sunglasses, obviously. Never wear contacts if you can. Don't wear contacts, wear glasses and move them up like onto your head or on your shirt whenever you're walking around outside. When it's summer, obviously, you can sunbathe as much as you want, I'd say. But, you have to do it within what your skin can handle. So now after doing all this stuff, again, I went from the palest person I knew, I'd burn, even on somewhere like Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts, in the summer in July, I'd burn like nuts in July. Even after 20 or 30 minutes of sun exposure. Now I was in Ecuador this summer, UV index 14, which is like really high. Even in New York or Philadelphia at the highest might go to like 10. So it was really high there. And I was out with my shirt off for a good amount of hours. I wasn't even getting burnt because I've just built up this solar callus, just like calluses on your feet from walking barefoot. It's a solar callus in your skin. So just build up that solar callus, watch Alexander Wunsch's videos. Because remember, when you know better, you do better. So get into that stuff, and then, that's
and then what about the lighting? What about the interior lighting in your house? Like what I've done is I have two sets of lighting. So I have my daytime lighting. I use full spectrum incandescent bulbs that have that range of color, and then in the day, because I want to be awake. And if I'm indoors working, I also will open my windows as much as possible to get that natural light in. I look out the window in between working on the computer. And then at night, I have all amber colored bulbs in the house. And I just know there's certain light switches I hit at night and there's certain ones I don't hit. Like in my bathroom, I have a gnarly bright LED light that's the fan. And then there's two little lights, the vanity lights. The vanity lights are like orange and then the overhead one. So I just know at night I go in there, I just don't click on that one. Or salt lamps and things like that.
Yeah.
One thing that I would recommend too is replacing the LED bulb in your refrigerator with a red or orange LED. I did that too because I switched the whole house and then I opened the fridge and boom. And I've heard that even a couple seconds of blue light in your iris and going through the optic nerve shuts down melatonin and fucks up your sleep. It's not like you have to be staring at a computer for 3 hours. No, just even one shot of blue light.
Yeah, even a little bit has an impact.
Tells your brain, oh, it's noon right now, and you're in, the Yucatan, or you're at the equator at noon because it's the only place you would ever see pure blue light like that.
Much blue.
So anything, what have you done like indoors, or you just wear your orange glasses when you're inside the house and have whatever lights on?
Yeah, well, honestly, what you're doing is basically, ideal. I'd say the best option again is to be outdoors, so you're getting full UV exposure. You don't necessarily need to be in the sun sunbathing because it'll get too hot. You can be in the shade and still be getting UV reflection. So for anyone who has the ability, working outside during the daytime is ideal, and then at nighttime, yeah, darkness is obviously ideal. But if you don't have anything to do in the dark, or you don't want to read just by candlelight, then you can, again, have really dim red or amber lights, and you can get them on Amazon. Just look up red or amber lights, and they'll do, there's all kinds of different ones. Lowbluelights.com also has options. I'm going to be on my website selling things like these in the future. I actually have a company I've started called Raw Optics. So it's like Ra, the sun god, and then optics, like the science and the branch of physics that deals with electromagnetism. So it's basically a synonym for the sun's light, but raw optics. And so we're going to be selling all kinds of products that help us to align more with the right electromagnetic fields and less with the wrong ones. So we're starting with blue blocking glasses. So Luke's glasses, my glasses that I'm wearing right now, are tinted by my company. Then we're going to hopefully very soon be selling phone filters and clip-on blue blocking glasses and things like that people can use. So we'll be selling light bulbs if you're not getting them in the near future. But if you want to act fast, which I highly recommend people do, go on Amazon, find red or amber bulbs, and they're great. The best thing, I actually have one right here. If the Facebook Live is still filming, people will see this. It's a headlamp that I put a piece of duct tape over the white LED, but it has a red function as well. So I just press the button that turns on the red, and it's really like, it's kind of, if you look right into the LED, it's super bright, but if you're not looking right into it, it's actually pretty dim light. And it's really nice because I can be around my house in the evening. The light moves with me, so I'm not tripping and falling over stuff because I'm trying to have everything dark. Like, I've experienced that, and it's not fun. So don't try to go all dark because you're going to fall.
Biohacker 101.
Yeah, you're going to learn.
Don't bust your ass.
Yeah, exactly. Don't bust your ass trying to fix your circadian rhythm, because it's worth the effort. But if you break your leg or something or hurt yourself, then you just could be smarter than that. So headlamp's great. And I've measured the EMF from this thing. You might think, oh, there's a headlamp right up against your head. There's going to be a huge EMF, like electromagnetic field that's non-native that could cause problems. But really, it's just a tiny little battery in here. So it doesn't really create much of a field at all from the measurements I've used. So I'm okay with it. And I don't have it on like strapped to my head all night. It's just when I'm moving around or when I'm trying to read a book, or sometimes I just take it off and set it down and use it as like an ambient light. But that's, I think, a really good option for the most dim, but still being able to see and do stuff. Candles are great too. And then daytime, again, like daytime outdoors is best, but if you have to be indoors, I'd say the next best option is to only use light through the windows or to open your windows. Then the next best would be get incandescent full spectrum bulbs. Like Edison bulbs are really the best I can recommend because they're usually used for decoration and decorative purposes, but they're really dim amber. So they mimic the sun's light more like in the morning and the afternoon where it's more yellow. And that's good because then you're getting at least something more natural and you're not getting the negative effects of that constant bright white where it's just like booming and destroying your eye and your hormones and everything.
Dude, you know what the gnarliest blue light is headlights.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, dude, those LEDs.
So I'm so happy that because the glasses that Matt's referring to, you guys, that he tinted, they're prescription glasses because at night, I'm a little bit nearsighted now from looking at fucking computer screens, I believe.
Oh yeah, for
and
sure.
so the blue light and just from staring at something close for hours and hours, I didn't know you weren't supposed to do that. Now I know. So I'm trying to reverse it. It's another story. But what's awesome about these is they're prescription. So these are my night driving glasses. And also just night walking around New York City, night where it's almost midnight. Dude, it's 5 to midnight.
Oh my God.
This is insane. We'll wrap it up here in a minute. But to wear indoors at night and to be able to see. So it's really cool what you're doing. And, it's one of the reasons I want to have you on the show because most of the blue blocking glasses are just so lame looking that you would never want to wear them because it's like mortifying. I mean, you really have to have like a healthy ego to not feel like shit about yourself for looking like such a douche. So I've used my really lame like Uvex $8 blue blockers from Amazon just to humble myself and like learn how to not care that I'm being judged by people because that's a spiritual lesson in itself. But these are like some sick frames that I wear sunglasses, but I don't wear sunglasses because I don't need to anymore. So I got the prescription lenses put in and then you tinted them and now I'm like, I have some dope ass blue blockers that I can actually see in. Yeah. Because that's the thing. If you have a prescription and you put on blue blockers at night, you can't fucking see. And then I'm going to run into stuff or run someone off the road or whatever.
Absolutely.
So kudos on
Thank you.
sorting that out.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's hard to do that shit yourself. I mean, I've had people ask me, oh, where do you send them to get them dipped and this and that? I'm like, dude, I
it's
can't
really
remember.
tough.
There's all these numbers involved and codes you got to know. Like, who has time for that shit?
Yeah. So Raw Optics, we just streamlined the process for you guys. Rawoptics.io, RAoptics.io is our website. I'm just getting it up. So in the next few days, it'll be fully functional. We have two options. You can go on, you can select from the frames that we have. So we have some frames that we've selected that we really like, that we think will look good on everyone. You could pick a frame, and then the next step, you pick, do you want a daytime tint or a nighttime tint? So a yellow tint, for example, if you're in an office building and you can't change your job right now or something, you're under bright fluorescent lights, but you don't want the red because you don't want to get tired, you can use the yellow, and that's going to block the most energetic blues and really at least save your eyesight and your hormone levels. And then the melatonin is not such a huge issue during daytime, although you should be outside in the full spectrum UV, getting all that light. But, it's a really good temporary solution to have that yellow tint during the daytime. Or you could select the nighttime tint if you're going to be using them at night. And then you go and you select, okay, no prescription or I have a prescription. And so then what we'll do is we'll get the frames ordered for you with the right prescription. And then when we get them, we're going to tint them with the tint that you've asked for. Send them right to you. So you can buy that right away on our website, rawoptics.io. And then the other option, this is totally understandable, and this is how the company started. Let's just say you want a frame of your own, like the ones you find out there just aren't that attractive. That was my experience.
That's me, dude. These were some dope sunglasses. I really like. They have this like matte finished tortoise.
They're gorgeous.
Now it's funny though. They kind of look like they're very like garish. They're almost like Elton John.
I love them. It's so you.
They were kind of cooler as sunglasses, but I'm still. Dude, I spoke at an event here a couple nights ago, and there's a few hundred people in there. I was like, I don't care, man. I'm gonna wear them, and everyone's like, dude, those are dope glasses.
Yeah.
I'm like, I swear to God, I'm not like the a-hole that wears sunglasses inside, inside at night to try to look cool.
Yeah.
But a lot of people actually, dude, a lot of people are like, I did school them. I was like, I'm saving my melatonin, whatever. But I actually get a lot of compliments. Like people are like, dude, those are sick. They're a cool color. I'm like, I didn't actually get them because they're cool. But
they look good. Yeah. So so for people who want to pick your own frame, you can go on Glasses USA, Zenni Optical. Those are the two biggest online websites, Glasses USA or ZenniOptical.com. You pick a frame, you click no prescription, send it to me. You click the value lens package because it's just the one that doesn't have all these tints and coatings that are going to block the blue blocking tint. And then you follow the instructions on my site. It's all laid out basically, but you could get any frame you want, turn it into blue blockers. We'll send you the little bill on PayPal, ship it right to you, and you're going to have any frame you want with blue blockers. And you can get prescription lenses on ZenniOptical.com. So you can go on, pick a frame. They have hundreds of options. Put in your prescription, have them ordered to us. So you have the frame you want, the prescription you need. So you don't have to have like your prescription glasses and then some big safety goggles on top that have the blue blocking tint. It's really nice and easy. You're going to look great. And then you're going to be able to, feel really comfortable wearing blue blockers, just like other people. So many people wear glasses, but you're going to be able to wear glasses and feel comfortable, look good. And honestly, I think that's the most important thing, because if this blue blocking stuff and becoming healthy, fixing our circadian rhythms is going to get big, it's got to at least be somewhat streamlined. I mean, yeah, it'd be ideal if people would just say, I don't care what people think, but even I have difficulty doing that sometimes. I wanted to have a good looking frame for when I'm traveling around Europe and stuff. Like, I'm probably not going to tell every single person, I'm wearing these to protect my circadian rhythm, but I also don't want to have like big construction goggles on my face.
Dude. No, those
so
UVEX ones, those are brutal, homie. I mean,
you got it.
It's hard to go out. I consider myself somewhat humble. At times I can achieve that where I don't care what people think, but those are rough, man. Because literally you walk around and everyone's like, what?
Yeah.
You just look really weird. They kind of remind me of like the Ali G glasses, if anyone remembers that show, which is fantastic. If you haven't heard of it, you missed out. Okay, so we are now, my friend, at 3 hours, 7 minutes, and 55 seconds, which is by far, we're a high five from across the room here, the most epic interview on the Lifestylist podcast to date.
Oh, yeah.
Who knew that it makes perfect sense. I get an 18-year-old, this kid won't stop. You energize me, bro, and we just keep going. So The last thing I want, actually, nope, psych, haha, not ending. The last thing I wanted to say that I found out too is that a lot of the blue blocking glasses that you get, they are only in that yellow spectrum and don't cut it at night. They actually don't cut all the spectrums of blue and green that trash your melatonin. So it's a little deeper to it too. Like it has to be a very specific color in order to block out all the crappy light at night.
Yeah, basically, we want to find the best balance between what is going to optimize our melatonin levels while still having some functionality in the real world. Like obviously, the ideal, everyone, is getting darkness after the sun goes down. But as that's not possible, the next best is to get these like true darks that are really dark red, but there's a cheaper option on Amazon that's $10 called DeWalt laser enhancement glasses that they use for laser stuff. Yeah, you could save $70. Yeah, you could have saved $70, but it's okay. You can, But so anyway, they do the same exact thing as True Darks. I would recommend getting them instead of True Darks. But those are really dark. But then you probably can't drive with those because you can't really see the green lights on stoplights.
I found this out the hard way. I tried to drive in my True Darks, dude, and I almost freaking killed myself.
Exactly.
Because you literally can't tell if the light's green, yellow,
exactly.
So I was driving through Beverly Hills and I was like, shit, I almost like went through a couple red lights and I literally had to take them off.
So that's why, basically the tint that we use blocks all blue and green frequencies while letting through red, orange, and yellow, just like fire. That's really what it goes back to, is you're letting through the colors of fire and candlelight. And so it's, kind of optimal melatonin saving while still being functional. But the key to keep in mind is if we're exposed to bright lighting, even with blue blockers on, you're still getting melatonin suppression. So it's really ideal to have dim lighting no matter what you do at night.
I'm going to give one last tip on that, and that is for your computers. You guys, man, I highly recommend download this app. It's called Iris, like the iris in your eye. The website, I'll put it in the show notes, but it's easy to go to iris.co. That's what I have on my computer. It has like about 6 different settings, and you can also customize it. But there's one on here right now, like I can hit it, and it goes into, it's called Sleep. And when you click on sleep, it turns your whole screen basically red, which looks like you have on these glasses.
Oh, yeah.
And then you can also, if you have an iPhone, I really can't explain this because it's pretty techy, but you can go into your iPhone settings. You know about that shit?
Yeah, I have a video on it. It's called How to Biohack an iPhone.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And it's a long video. It's like 35 minutes, but I explain what the risks are with the phone, the EMF, the light. And then I explain how to fix it.
Oh, the EMF you did too?
Yeah, I just talk about it. So the airplane mode, turning off your location services. So it's 35 minutes, but it goes deep. And again, I could probably do it. I will do like a 5-minute quick video, like how do you hack it?
Yeah.
But the whole point is like if someone just wants to know how to change it on their phone, they're not going to do it probably forever. They're not going to realize why it's important. So, I make it long because it's kind of a gatekeeper for people who are just going to do it temporarily but not really have a benefit versus people who want to understand why they're doing it, and that way they're going to actually stick to it and get the benefit.
Yeah, because now on my iPhone it's dope, dude. I do triple click on the button and it turns it red. It's fantastic. I'm like, I'm not techie, but I went in there and just effed with the settings and like turned it, put my like hyperspeed button, the triple click to the red thing, and I'm like stoked.
Oh,
dude.
yeah.
And I always, by the way, keep my night shift on.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Unless, like, I was walking around the streets today, it was really bright out, so I couldn't really see it.
100%.
So
I know the feel because I'm the exact same way, dude.
Then and only then did I turn night shift off and made my screen bright blue.
Yeah, but then it doesn't matter because that's the only time
with the sun.
when there's more blue light in the sun.
Exactly.
But the other 90% of the day and the waking hours of your life, there's never that much blue. So it's like, when I'm outside in the sun, I'm sunbathing and I'm on my phone, I'm going to turn off even the night shift, which is like that little yellow that I call it day shift because it's like it just blocks out the blue to make it more manageable for the day.
Yeah.
If you just toggle between night shift on the most warm setting in your display and brightness settings versus no night shift, you'll see how bright white it is if you have it off.
Crazy.
It's terrible.
Dude, it's crazy because I've had mine on night shift just 24 hours a day ever since it came out, and I'll just experiment by turning it off, like laying in bed. It's like, oh my god, dude!
Man,
it's like this.
terrible.
It's like somebody put a flashlight in your face.
Oh my gosh!
All right, so we're gonna end it, dude. We have crushed this episode.
Yes, I think it's been pretty good.
I want to thank you so much. I'm like about to fall over.
Yeah.
My mitochondria says we need sleep.
Oh, yeah.
And probably we're getting some melatonin because we've been blocking the blue light since like
even
8
with this
PM.
kind of, this light, we started and we were like, oh, it's so dim. It's not, but now it feels so bright for me even.
It does, yeah.
And
So, okay, so you gave us your website. What about, you want to link your social media here? Where can people find you on Instagram or whatever?
So I've got mattmaruca.com. Maruca is my last name. That's my personal blog. I'm going to be going to Europe for a month on Tuesday, actually. I'm flying out of Newark Airport just across the river. I'm from Philadelphia, so it's a nice little drive. Yeah, I'll be traveling in Europe, then South America, so follow my travels. People might know of a guy named Casey Neistat, famous YouTuber. A lot of people know him. He's very famous. But my goal is to try to become like Casey Neistat, but with health. So it's like, someone's just doing cool stuff. And it's like, wow, this is so cool. I think that's the way to open people's hearts and get them to vibe with the health stuff. So that's what I'm going to go for. Make cool YouTube videos. I'm going to try to invest in a nice GoPro real soon. So my YouTube channel right now is Matt Maruca. And I'm almost at 100 subscribers. So I can get my own handle on the channel name, but it's just Matt Maruca, my name, Mattmaruca. That's hopefully going to be one of the bigger platforms for me to share information with people. My blog will have writing, stuff that needs more thinking and more time. I'll have articles, but I'll also have travel blogs. I have Instagram. It's Matty M. So 3 underscores between Matty and M. So Matty, 3 underscores M. I have a Facebook, Optimal Human Living is my Facebook page. Like if you do the URL, and that's basically it. Yeah.
Awesome, dude. Well, thank you so much for hanging out. It's really good to see you again. Thank you for bringing so much heat, so much value to the Lifestylist podcast. In closing, I want to ask you my final 3-part question. I think you've already answered it because you've named your top 3 guys, but let's maybe go outside of the realm of health experts or scientists that write books. But what have been 3 great teachings or teachers in your life that you might recommend to people?
Number 1, I think this is the poem that probably changed my life forever. It's called The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Most people know it, but most people probably never touched as deeply as I was as a little kid. But, it's 2 roads diverge in a yellow wood. And basically he says that I, saw these 2 beautiful paths, and one looked so beautiful and the other looked so beautiful, but I was worried about taking the path that everyone else was taking and the one that no one was taking. I didn't know what to do, but I decided to go on the one that was less traveled by, and that made all the difference, basically. And so that's Robert Frost, number 1, biggest, probably decisive poem in my life. Number 2, a person who's really influenced me. I had a Peruvian nanny growing up, and she just embodied me with these values of loving kindness and just honesty and love and truth. And I think that's really common. If you look at South American and Latino cultures, these people are often just so happy and smiley. And I think it has a lot to do with their more connected lifestyle, lots of sun exposure, high dopamine levels. But she kind of brought that light into my life. So even though I'm a white guy growing up in the suburbs of Philadelphia in a pretty wealthy, privileged area, I had that kind of love for 8 years growing up of someone from South America. And that definitely touched me. I think humbled me in some ways. And then the third, I'd say recently, I just read a book called The Places That Scare You by Pema Chodron, who's a Western Buddhist monk who helps, teach Westerners these practices. And another guy, Thich Nhat Hanh, also is fantastic, but he said, you don't have to be Chinese to have the authorization to eat Chinese food. So it's the same thing with mindfulness. You don't have to be Buddhist to have the authorization to enjoy mindfulness. So Pema Chodron's book, The Places That Scare You, explains how we always tend to run away from uncomfortable feelings and emotions, but actually the most effective way to handle them is to be present with them. So every morning, one of the few things that I've been able to kind of hold on to, even though it recommends not holding on to anything and letting go of something once you see yourself holding on to it.
Right, you're like, I'm attached to this Buddhist teaching.
Yeah, but I shouldn't be attached. That's actually how they describe it. But nonetheless, the teaching is every morning when I wake up, I write, and some gratitude, things I'm grateful for, and then things that would make the day great. But one thing that I've been writing all the time lately is that to make the day great, is to let my fears and anxieties and worries know that they're welcome with me and that they're gonna be loved equally. That's what she says to do, and it's amazing because no matter how bad things get, you're just gonna show compassion to those things, and it's just everything just gets better from that. It's
the
amazing.
only way past it is through it.
Yeah, that's so true.
It really is true, man. That's great. That's great wisdom, and
that's really great.
I am very envious of you that you're figuring this shit out at such a young age, you bastard. Took me till I was like 30 years old to even think about stuff like that. No, it's awesome, man, dude. You're doing great.
Thank you.
You're an inspiration to
me
and so many people. So thanks for being here, man. And until next time, I bid you farewell.
I bid you farewell.
Okay, here we are at the end of this epic interview with Matt Maruca. And I just want to tell you straight up, if you hear my voice right now, that means that you are dedicated to upgrading your lifestyle. You are, in fact, a diehard, cut-in-the-wool biohacker, because not everyone can sit and listen to this type of information for 3+ hours. So kudos to you. I'm going to give you some applause on that one. Thank you so much for joining me. It really, 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 really means a lot that you take the time to take in the information that I'm putting out on this show and supporting what I do and supporting my illustrious guests like Matt Maruca. So big hand to you. Much gratitude here from the heart. Speaking of gratitude, if you've got some from this show and you're going like, wow, I just learned so much. This guy Matt's amazing. This Luke guy's okay too. What can I do to give back? Holla, here it is. All you've got to do is open that podcast app, the Apple Podcast app, and leave a rating and review. I would be so appreciative. You have no idea how 2 minutes of your time can really help to support a podcast like mine. If you're listening on some other device and you're like, yo, I don't have the Apple Podcast app because I'm crazy and I don't have an iPhone, I'm trying to be different and special and all that. No, I'm just making fun of you. It's all good. Use whatever damn device you want. But listen, if you want to leave a review, I've made it super easy. I created a whole tutorial on how to do it from desktop or your phone. And you can find that at lukestory.com/how to iTunes review. Pretty sweet, right? I've made it like dummy easy for you. You have no excuse if you're a listener to the show and you have a heart to go to lukestory.com/how to iTunes review and hook it up. You can also go to lukestory.com/store where you can find all of my favorite products. I've been researching this stuff for 21 plus years. Everything worth its salt is located on that store, in addition to tons of discounts on most of the things in there. Special thanks to this week's sponsors. We've got Athletic Greens. You can go to athleticgreens.com/Luke and get 20 free travel packs valued at $99 with your first purchase. Pretty sweet. Next up, we've got Organifi. Now, my favorite product of theirs currently is the Organifi Gold. They make a green, they make a red, they got all the colors of the rainbow. But dude, I'm just going to tell you straight up, the Organifi Gold is the most chronic drink powder ever. I love this stuff. So go to Organifi.com/Luke. That's Organifi with an I. Enter the code Lifestylist and save 20% off your first order. Pretty badass. Last but not least, my old buddies over at Sigmatic. I think they're one of my first advertisers on the show. Love those guys for their loyalty. I'm loyal to them. You can go to forsigmatic.com/Luke Story to find all of my favorite items that I use of theirs on a daily basis, like no joke. And the audience discount there is 15%. You can use the code Luke Story to apply that to your order. Then don't forget to check out next week's episode with Donnie Epstein, the founder of Epi-Energetics and Network Spinal Analysis. And last but not least, you can come hang out with me in person June 14th at 6:30 p.m. at Bulletproof Labs in Santa Monica, California. If you want to come to that event or any event at which I'm participating, you can always find that at lukestory.com/events. Goddamn, that's a lot of / to announce in a show outro. But there it is. Big applause to our guest, Matt Maruca. Great guy, brilliant dude. Really looking forward to seeing what he produces in the world. And make sure you go get yourself some blue blockers from his site, mattmaruca.com/blue blockers. And don't forget there, you can save 10% with the code Lifestylist. This is like, he's a true entrepreneur. What is he, 18, 19, whatever. And He's like, there's no cool blue blockers on the market, so I'm going to let people use custom frames, which is what I did, and use whatever glasses they want, prescription or otherwise. So he's doing some really cool stuff. Can't wait to see what's next. All right. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. And I'm going to let you go because we're like 4 goddamn hours into this thing at this point. Thank you so much for listening. Peace out. Hey, are you a musician who listens to this show? Well, listen up, all right? Put those musician ears on blast for a second. I've got an announcement for you. I recently ran into a listener to the show at an event, and she said, wow, I love the show. It's amazing. It's perfect. I said, thank you so much. But as always, I asked the question, what can I do to improve it? And she said, well, to be honest, I'm getting a little tired of your theme song reoccurring throughout the show every single episode. And I said, you know what? I love that song, but I am too. So I'm going to go ahead and seek out some new music. I'm going to record some myself. I'm going to hit up some of my friends, but I'd really like to have a plethora of new music that I can rotate in and out of the show. So if you'd like to have your music featured on the Lifestylist podcast, go ahead and shoot me an email to info@lukestorey.com with a link to some of your songs. And if I think that'd be a good fit, I'll answer your email and we'll see what we can do. And just to be clear, I am looking for royalty-free music. If I could afford to put some stones on the show, I would do that. But I do not have a budget for commercial music. So if you'd like to promote your music and it's a good fit for the show, again, send an email with a link to info@lukestorey.com. Thanks so much. This episode of the Lifestylist Podcast was produced by podcastmasters.net.